Yeah.
Why are you
Do
complaining
your
about AI
keys
white noise?
do your keys mint tokens as you type? Like, is that generating a form of electricity?
I'm working on it. I really am. In the meantime, I've got my cats on those giant wheel things, just trying to generate enough power to mint some tokens out here and pay their rent.
Good times, good times. Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back to the Three Buddy Problem. This is episode 107 with a special guest buddy, Greg Lesnewich from Proofpoint. We'll get to Greg and some of the announcement they did this week. Before we get started, a special shout out to all the folks at Thinkst Canary, the sponsors of this episode. Most companies discover they've been breached way too late. Thinkst Canary has addressed this. With just 2 minutes of setup, no ongoing overhead, nearly zero false positives, and you can detect attackers long before they dig in. Thinkst Canaries are deployed and loved on all 7 continents. For a sample of like some customer appreciation and so what some folks say about Thinkst, check out canary.tools/love. A quick mention that Harun Mir and the Thinkst team will be on the Black Hat show floor next week. Stop by booth 2767, booth 2767. Write it down. Check them out for some live demos at Black Hat. Shout out to Harun and the team. Good luck to all the folks heading to Black Hat with their talks. Let's introduce our guest buddy this week. Greg Lesnewich is at Proofpoint. What is Proofpoint and what do you do over there?
What is Proofpoint is a complicated question. We are primarily known for having a secure email gateway, and we do a bunch of other security stuff. But I work in the research team, specifically within the espionage tracking team, where our job is to make sure threat actors can't get into our customers, and that all of our friends in the IR and EDR space don't have any work because we block all of the inbound attempts.
Yeah, you guys sit at the perfect perch there, like at the email gateway, kind of having the ability to intercept and have visibility there. What kind of visibility and threat intel data you sit on that you think these guys don't have? Like, what's the sweet spot of what you guys get to research?
What are you keeping from us?
A lot there. So I think one of the things that is like unique and fun about the role is it's kind of like the inverse of finding like really long-term infections. It's just kind of a hornet's nest every day, because everybody like in the e-crime space, obviously like a vast majority of them use email for initial access. Obviously there's spam that you have to then filter out, but then there's kind of this like obviously like C- espionage actors all the way up to what I would kind of categorize as like B+, A- kind of threats in kind of the overall landscape that still use it. And so I think one of the things that's kind of fun is that there are so many actors that we deal with on like a weekly basis. We're a pretty small team. There's only 4 of us that actually kind of like quote unquote work the actors. And we see pretty much someone from Russia, someone from China, someone from Iran or related Middle East areas, India, Pak, and North Korea on like a weekly basis. So not all of them are like all that notable, but it is kind of an interesting reflection on all those kind of clusters, operational tempos of, you know, how often they're throwing the phishing emails is kind of indicative of how active at least one operator is.
Costin, how do you rate the work from Greg's team?
I wanted to say Greg is most famous for his uncanny ability to pivot like into everything from one thing into thousands, which is maybe if you remember why I said like a few episodes ago, if someone can actually solve that AngrySpark, it should be Greg, or it will be Greg.
Why is that?
Like, yeah,
I believe you summoned him.
I summoned Greg, sorry. No, I just love Greg's work. And you know me, like I'm all about IOCs, about Yara rules. And I, like most recently when Greg was presenting at one of these conferences, I was like the guy, you know, writing down all those IOC. And like luckily he shared all that in machine format afterwards. But nevertheless, I think the presentation was just like filled with IOCs.
All right, I think we can start there. Let's just get into it. Greg, you guys were super busy over the last week, 2 weeks. Well, super busy over, I would guess, the last 6 months. But over the last 2 weeks, you guys published one, two, I believe, three separate blog posts alongside a press release and a report from the NSA doing some attribution around the Laundry Bear. Laundry Bear is an actor we have discussed in the past on this show, and Costin and these guys will dig into it. But just kind of set the stage about at a high level, tell the audience exactly what you guys announced this week.
Yeah, so we had a pretty crazy 2 weeks in that we got to be a part of a joint release with NSA, FBI, and like 16 of the allies in what I'm told is the most co-seals on one of those joint cybersecurity advisories they've had before. And so that was like, we started that week thinking, wow, we're like ready to take a little bit of a victory lap and be like, hey, we're a part of this NSA thing. Like, we're not some of these other firms, and this isn't a knock at any of them, but we don't have analysts embedded at the fort or anywhere that we're like doing this work alongside them. It was kind of we had ironically had a blog ready in December of last year when we got in touch with those agencies, and they were like, hey, do you want to, we want to publish something. Do you want to do something together? And like my eyes lit up like, yeah, of course we do. Like, what do you mean? Like this, like in the grand scheme of things, I think prior to last Wednesday, what we had found was kind of like, obviously it was solid analytical work, but in the grand scheme of a splash that it would make for us or like Proofpoint, it was like up there, like it would have gotten some decent press, but all of a sudden you attach it to, NSA's name to it, and suddenly it's kind of stops people in their tracks, especially internally. So, we started last week, all set to publish on that, and another Russian GRU cluster that was ironically much more prolific in kind of what we call the half-click exploit space, which is a term that I did not come up with, but I am going to milk and abuse.
I was going to ask about that.
It's not that bad.
I hadn't heard it before this.
I hadn't heard it until we were talking with some of our friends in the federal government that were like, I was trying to ask them, like, what's your shorthand? Like, what do you call this thing? They were like, well, we call it half click. And it kind of makes sense, right? Like, you kind of have to click something like through your webmail browser to get exploited, but it feels like a little bit like stolen valor to compare it to like an iPhone level 0-click where you throw a message at a user, they never see it, but they get compromised. And so I didn't want to, it felt kind of like walking that right road of a user will be largely unaware that they have gotten infected or they interacted with something suspicious, but it's not zero interaction. It's just kind of minimal interaction. And so we had these reports ready, and then Wednesday we found them targeting Outlook we found Laundry Bear, I should say, targeting Outlook users with a similar cross-site scripting exploit. And I'd listened to last week's episode, and Costin had made some comment about all this targeting of obscure webmails. And it was the first, I kid you not, it was the first thought in my head. It was like, Costin, this one isn't obscure anymore. This is like the big one. It was like obviously to rush it out in about a week on the heels of that was we really flooded the market with reporting. But it was kind of it was one of those things. And I think, Costin, you also mentioned this last episode of having the intuition of knowing when something is special and unique and interesting. Like as soon as I started decoding the base 64 in the message body, intuition just told me like, no, this is it. And to have it be something that was as well built and as kind of difficult to remove like the infection from a user, like from the browser and from Exchange and all that, it was kind of like man, like is this the best week of my professional life? It kind of felt that way. So yeah, that's the high level story.
Let's separate them out. The first one, the original one that went alongside the NSA attribution piece was, what are you calling, TA488? I want to get into you with naming schemes. We'll get to that later on because we got a Mandy and bit on that there. But you guys have Laundry Bear, this Russian-aligned threat actor, doing sustained espionage campaign against Zimbra mail servers using these half-click exploits. You mentioned half-click, so help the audience understand what exactly is the definition for your half-click and what you saw in the original announcement.
Yeah, so we use the term half-click to describe emails that can basically run JavaScript as you render it in the webmail viewer. So it doesn't require you to click a link. It doesn't require you to respond to the attacker. It doesn't require you to open an attachment and run something. Opening the email is enough to kind of initiate the infection. And so Laundry Bear, we can just use that name. It'll be easier. Had been using this Zimbra exploit for, I guess, around like 9 to 10 months total. 5 months of it as a 0 day, and then a couple months later, or continuing on months after that, with it as an end day.
So setting up and patched halfway through, and they continue to use it as end day. Okay.
Yep. And it did some pretty, like, I'd say moderately interesting things, like the way it was doing exfiltration of credentials over DNS was kind of interesting. The fact that it was pretty like well built in terms of being able to steal emails from Zimbra, the last 90 days of emails that particular user could had access to. It would steal all those. It would steal credentials from the browser and the Zimbra backend. And it would, the reason it really stood out to us initially was that any of the actors that get persistence after they use one of these cross-site scripting exploits really stands out. Most of them, they steal, it's sort of a drive-by to steal credentials, or drive-by to like steal as many emails or whatever as they can. And then there's as soon as the user closes the webmail viewer tab, the JavaScript kind of stops running. And Laundry Bear was one of those ones. They wrote something that was called an app-specific password into the Zimbra server itself that would give them IMAP and SMTP access to, I believe, at least the user's account, if not the whole mail server, so they could like they could send out additional exploit emails to additional targets, and then obviously whatever you can do with that access on a Zimbra server to steal additional stuff. So that was kind of one of the main reasons that it stood out originally.
And Greg, you guys said obviously TA488 is the one with these cool things. How do you rate, their work? Because there isn't that much information available, in my opinion, about this particular group. Remember when Microsoft originally dropped their blog, they had just very, very few IOCs, maybe a C2. So I know like your research also includes other things like TA458, and maybe you can talk a bit about like who is TA458 and how do you rate these guys, Void Blizzard, Laundry Bear, compared to the most established groups out there?
Yeah, so I'll take 458 first. I think we can just say the group behind Operation RoundPress because they don't have another alias, and the TA numbers that we use are intentionally similar for various Easter egg reasons. There's nothing more special beyond that. Ryan, they're both Ferrari models.
I got you.
So
Awesome.
anytime something would get unked in our data, if it was using one of these half-click exploits, we would give the unk name something like an F1 car part. So it was originally unk pit stop, unk heat sink, unk twin turbo, etc. Because it's most of the time nobody sees those names except me and my teammates, so we try and have a little fun with it.
Are all of you car nerds, or is it just a happy coincidence here?
It is my oldest kid just happened to love F1 when we found the first one of these things, and it was like off to the races.
There you go.
Yeah, so
Fair
it
enough.
worked out. And so yeah, ironically, that got the TA458 stuff is linked to a blog from ESET called Operation RoundPress. Matthew Fau, and as you guys have discussed on this podcast a lot, ESET is always kind of at the top of their game, and Matthew was sort of like the godfather of finding and tracking and blogging about these things. So he found this cluster that wasn't in the NSA advisory, doing a bunch of these hack-click exploits against Roundcube, against Zimbra, and some more obscure things like Horde and MDaemon, just these kind of various mail servers, because that is what smaller governments and military mail servers were running. And they're particularly interesting, I think, because they have what seems to be like an exploit development pipeline that they are at least the beneficiaries of. I don't know if they are kind of in the mix of it. I don't know if they are just buying and procuring these things, or if they get handed down from someone in Russian Gov. But they are kind of like they were until last week, in my opinion, kind of the apex of what of the space, because they didn't care about getting burned. They would keep using the same exploits or new exploits whenever they could get access to them. We put out a blog last week about their usage of exploits, basically, that we've seen since ESET's original piece. And yeah, they were the reason that we kind of got into all this, because we saw ESET publishing about this and getting all these CVEs to their name. And I just kind of got annoyed. Like, if we're the best secure email gateway out there, shouldn't we be the ones doing this? And 18 months later, thankfully, I think we're getting a little bit closer to that goal. But yeah, so
that's
they
fucking
were
awesome. Sorry, just to put a pin, just to put a little flag there, right? Like that's it's rare that we get to hear about research driving, product improvement and development, especially over like a proper timeline, right? It wasn't like, for 6 weeks we kind of beat our head against.
I'm just fascinated by hearing like competition driving competition, like the one team pushing another team. I mean, like, and it's amazing to hear Greg mention the podcast so much. You guys listen to it like every episode?
I definitely do. It is the perfect thing when you're doing not menial tasks, but like I definitely can't listen to it while I'm working and I need to be focused. But if I'm like driving somewhere, particularly without kids in the car, or like mowing the lawn or something, it's like the perfect thing where I can like have my brain going, but not like distracting me from other things. So yeah, almost every episode.
What can you tell us about the target for Laundry Bear that you've seen? Where are these infections happening? Who's being hit? Like where's the heat map?
Yeah, so for Laundry Bear, the original heat map was very Ukraine focused and like education entities in the US, and the education entities overlapped with targeting of things, and like I'm trying to think of the right word for this. I'm not trying to obscure any information, but entities interested in the research about nuclear fusion, particularly those interested in like magnetic fusion research. I have no idea what that means. And I know that you don't fact check on here, but I also don't want to really put my foot in my mouth about something that meaningful. And so I think that is what kind of got U.S. government's interest in it, was this targeting of like entities in the U.S. that were doing sort of magnetic fusion research. The caveat I want to throw in there is that all of that targeting happened in a very narrow window of like 2 weeks. So it stands to reason to me that they happened upon a list of email addresses that looked moderately interesting, and they weren't trying to necessarily target all of those entities, but they were casting a wide net, some of which happened to be in our customer base. So there's definitely not like a definitive answer as to why they were doing it. It's kind of something that's like, it's prickled the back of my brain for a long time. And my assumption is that, FBI and NSA aren't so gung-ho about publishing something if it wasn't doing something meaningful, particularly outside of my visibility. So I think that targeting, plus most of these entities are active in Ukraine. So I think that kind of combination was pretty meaningful in terms of targeting.
By
Costin,
the way,
have you seen this magnetic victimology anywhere else?
Magnetic fusion. I was like, I like to keep myself informed about things like fusion and physics and whatever, but I admit I don't know what magnetic fusion research refers to. And I need to document that. Like I need to enlighten myself.
Already asking the models.
Tell us,
don't worry
what
about
is
it.
that?
I got you. No, I have no fucking clue, but I'll let you know in a bit. Just keep going.
Go
There was
ahead,
something,
Costin.
by the way, there was something that Greg said, and we all jumped over that like very lightly. And I think it was a very important point he made. And he said that there was like some intuition that immediately told him that, wow, what this thingy, maybe it's like the case of my career. And I wanted to ask, like, how do you develop that intuition? Like, what let's say, what is your advice to other researchers? How to develop that intuition? What does it take to grow it?
And after Greg answers, can you answer it as well, Costin? Because I feel like this is the magic
Yeah,
involved.
sure.
And Juanito, for you as well, I like if you guys can kind of have a conversation among yourself about like what are the pinpoints of those.
Yeah, so I think for me, I am triaging roughly like anywhere from like 5 to 30 unique samples of looking for this type of exploit, both from our data set and from VirusTotal, on a daily basis. And so there's a lot of muscle
Manually?
memory. Yeah. There's a little bit of, so there's some tooling that we have to down select those things. But if the JavaScript gets moved around, if we don't have a perfect, detection for what the exploit trigger is, we want to just manually review those. And the helpful part of that is that you kind of develop an eye for what's unusual. Some of it is just JavaScript inside of a message to make the message formatting really pretty. And what's tricky about it is you don't want to put negations in for stuff like that, because like them messing with sizes of the JavaScript in an email messing with the size of something is a legitimate thing, but it's also something that the actor could abuse. So it's sort of like you have to kind of build your kind of funnel, for lack of a better term, around things outside of the JavaScript and just focus on finding it. And so manually kind of triaging those on a given basis, or on a daily basis, in the range of like 5 to 20 unique ones, you sort of develop an eye for when something stands out. And this one stood out because there was the base64 that contained the JavaScript was all chunked. And so when I decoded it, each chunk I don't use Hue, but I do use a tool called Binary Refinery for that. And a bunch of them had Outlook APIs referenced in them. And I had never seen that before. And it was kind of like okay, I need to pay attention to this. And as soon as I kind of compiled it into the singular script like the exploit was doing, that was kind of what did it. So as far as advice to other researchers, it's like specialize as much as you can so that you develop an eye and a muscle memory for that. And I'm sure I could spend hours with a friend of ours, Mike, about talking about like the brain elasticity and creating myelin to wrap the neurons so that they fire faster by repeating these tasks all the time. But we don't need to get into that today.
Binary Refinery and shrooms apparently is like this important combination.
These anomalies, like the one that pop up here, they are very rare. They pop up all the time. And like, how do you separate like finding the needle in the haystack? What is?
So some of them just are anomalies in that my location of finding something weird in the email was off. So it'd be like a JavaScript or an HTML attachment that has JavaScript. And so it's very easy to kind of dismiss those because it's not that it's not malicious. It's that it's not in this research focus of mine. In terms of how anomalous they are, I think in our data and externally, we track about 16 different clusters using them. Some of those are like named actors like APT28 or whatever they're called now, and Winter Wyvern, and a couple of other actors that use it in parallel to other stuff. And those things tend to be kind of, when named actors tend to use them, they tend to be a little bit more interesting than when you see kind of a one-off campaign that you can't really attribute. So in terms of like, thankfully, because it's all JavaScript, it's relatively easy to eyeball if it's the same or if it's different. And of course, the models are all pretty good at differentiating those things to be like, hey, like what's different about these ones, especially if something's on VT. It's really easy to be like, hey, throw this at the Opus 4.6, and hey, tell me what's different and what's the same about all these. But in terms of like its prevalence inside of at least Proofpoint's data, it's pretty rare. Like I would say that we are running into like if you were to bound an email campaign on a weekly basis, so 4 weeks, give or take a month, just for the sake of like thinking of your buckets relatively easily, I'd say we see 1 to 2 a month, as opposed to, obviously we're seeing millions upon millions in the e-crime space every week. And then on the espionage side, it's probably closer to like maybe 50 to 75 emails a week. And so when one of these shows up for our team, it's definitely really anomalous and kind of gets, at least for me, it gets the juices flowing. I think the rest of my team is a little bit burnt out because they had to push the last paper out while I was on vacation, without me. So, yeah, but definitely
You've
kind
got
of
a solid team, though, thankfully.
Yeah. The best. I would say it's one of the best right now. So yeah,
You guys are stacked. That's all I'm saying, right? That's what Ryan, has been bringing up in the past few episodes, right? You guys have been collecting some pretty great researchers.
Yeah,
Costin, what are you? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, we've been stealing from the best. We stole Sahar. We stole Mark Kelly from RF. We stole Nick Atfield from S1. And then we borrowed, we got to steal a guy called Constantine internally from one of our detection teams, all under former ESET research manager Alexei, who is now our boss. So yeah, we're kind of awesome. Firing on all cylinders. And the running joke is to kind of keep up with our crime team, who is like putting out like 2 or 3 blogs a week and involved in every Operation Endgame takedown. So it's we're definitely a little bit of the little brother in the house, and try and stomp our feet and make our impact where we can.
I don't want to get lost in the intuition thread, but do you guys, Costin, do you have a response to how Greg kind of figures it out? Does it differ from yours?
On one hand, I fully agree, and a lot of the great threat finders out there, like our good friend Mr. Minie back in the days, but also many others, they do exactly what Greg is saying. They just go through huge amounts of samples by hand, and they just look at the samples with their own eyes. Some people, they look in IDA, other people use Hue, other people use FAR, like to look at the sample in hex. For me, like looking at the sample in hex in FAR is one of the fastest method to spot if there is something about that sample or not. Now, I think that this intuition probably you can split into there are people out there who are natively talented at spotting patterns, not just like repeating patterns, but kind of outliers, patterns that go outside, let's say, the vast majority of patterns they see. So when they see like 20 average samples per day, the moment that they see something like which deviates from those patterns, they immediately spot it out. And I've done like a lot of trainings in which you can recognize that the people in the training, they want to understand like how do you catch us, or like what is your secret sauce for finding all these things. And I think it's a mix. It's just like an LLM. The LLM is just one part. You also need the right tools. You need the right harness. And when you combine the right brain, like people who are kind of inherently talented for this pattern recognition, together with the tools and data. So what else do you need? You need like access to a lot of good big data, and then you need to build the tools that will increase the quality of the samples that you analyze. So those tools can be, for instance, your own secret Yara rules. They can be like probabilistic pattern matching things. They can be systems like the ones that our good friend Mr. Miniev built back in the days that would look for anomalies, things like that. And when you have all these together, that is when you start, burning things. You start burning operations. And I guess the issue is that you will probably find the most sophisticated ones. So it matters a lot how you train this skill, but also it matters where you do this. You need to have the right access to tools, and you need to have the big data behind you, and you need to have the time. I mean, maybe this is one of the reasons why I still look at a lot of stories and samples by hand every single day. So I try to, I don't know, every day I look at another blog, I manually process all that, I build like a workflow in which I download the samples from the blog, I extract all the IOCs, I manually check, all the indicators in our databases just to see if they appeared before. I try to build Yara rules, I compare them against older things. So just simply going through that process, I think it builds the intuition, just like Greg was saying. But also other things help, by the way. Like I play this game on LinkedIn called Zip, and I think it's fantastic.
It's you. No
I
wonder
mean,
I'm seeing
the
it
fuck
popping
is
up in my
this?
what
freaking
the
feed
fuck
all
is
the
that?
time. It's you.
It's a game, man. It's a game. In my opinion, the best people in the world who are good at spotting patterns are the best people at Zip. So just like go in there, like try to solve a few of them and see who are like the best at this game. I think those people are the best in the world at
I'm
pattern
gonna have to go
recognition.
play a fucking LinkedIn game.
You have to,
What is
yeah, only this.
happening?
Honestly, only this. Everything else.
First of all, you're on
they
LinkedIn, now they got you
um,
playing games.
Dude,
they're
I forget to
like,
post my research on there. I
useless.
forget. I just I open LinkedIn and I'm like, what the fuck is happening here? Just walk right out.
Ignore all that. Ignore all that. Just go for the Zip. Just play the Zip and see like who's the best like in the world. And like that will teach you like I think that whoever is running this game at Microsoft, they're inferring some amazing insights about people from the speed and how they solve this game. I tell you, like it's amazing to see that clusters of different people, they are like the best on different days depending on the puzzle. So you can see that on some days there's like this group of people who are the best. On other days
puzzles.
are like
There's
other
no way.
people.
What's going on?
There's no way they're not
I-
training a fucking model on
They
this. Like,
must be training.
They must be training a fucking
I
model on
wonder,
this.
like, it's what they're hunting for. Is like one of those games where you're hunting for people capable with like some very specific visualization skills, who I don't know can
Mind
optimize
control.
LLMs or
This
like
is gonna
have.
be some ARC AGI testing shit. Like they're
Could be.
benchmarking for some kind of reasoning model.
I don't want us to get waylaid, and we haven't heard from Juanito at all for this show.
with
And I
his
want to
AI
dovetail it.
ramblings.
No. We're saving him for the AI section. But I want to
That's
dovetail
fair.
this conversation with acknowledging some Spotify commenters. There's a guy there asking a very specific question to you. Fix your hair, fix your hair. He says, I love the way JAGS thinks about systems. Does he have any advice about how to approach and develop the skill needed to tackle problems with this way of thinking? Pretty good question, and it ties into what we're talking about here.
Yeah, that is a good question. Okay, so let me. I don't want to go on forever.
Back up and remind
let
the
me back up
audience
to the
about your
intuition
systems
question.
thinking. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, so on the systems thinking bit, and now you got me all jumbled up, right? Systems thinking bit. This is something I've been pushing onto the industry almost forcefully, but it's been kind of about sharing my own process, right? Like that's the kind of thinking that's been most rewarding and intuitive. When maybe about 2 years ago, I did a virus bulletin keynote where, I mean, I don't know if anybody got anything out of that keynote. Because I was basically saying like, hey, we're talking about this shit in military, like threat intel and cyber in militaristic terms. It doesn't really reflect how this shit works. So what if we just threw out all those terms and tried to talk about it like from scratch? And I don't know that people understood what I was saying, because I don't think that I understood what I was saying. But I was starting to kind of like try to dig for some way to talk about these things that was just like different terminology, different conceptual framework, and kind of stumbled into systems thinking and cybernetics. And I've been like doing a lot of reading about like complexity theory and like complex adaptive systems since the pandemic. And that worked for me. I really think that we can all get a lot of benefit from it. But to answer that question more specifically, I've been reading everything I could find. I think the best intro and the best, most approachable way to get into this sort of thing is actually Donella Meadows' work. She passed away not too long ago, but has like a huge following in that sort of intellectual community. and she wrote a book. God, I'm blanking on the name right now, but I'll find it in a second. That's basically like an intro to systems thinking, and there's videos of her lectures at MIT, and they're entirely introductory. So like it's very easy, but like the whole point of it is just, let's forget the nitty-gritty, the specifics, and instead kind of abstract to thinking about the system in flows and sinks, and like this goes into this, like where are the points of friction, where's the points of throughput and bandwidth, and how does that describe how information flows in a system, how data flows in a system. We already think about things this way. Like I think for threat intel people, it's gonna feel very familiar, except that nobody told you that there were already terms and rules and most importantly, solutions to the problems you're describing when you think about it at that level. So it's incredibly rewarding. I think, it's a complete intellectual deviation from what we do, but I think folks are going to find it very rewarding. Now, circling back to the intuition question, I obviously didn't have that going into the industry and into trying to figure things out here. I kind of had something tangential in having more of like a philosophy background, but the intuition thing has nothing to do with that hyper intellectual understanding. It has so much more to do with these like intrinsic, innate capabilities in your brain that you can't quite describe, but there's a lot more processing happening in there than we're consciously aware of. And I think it's why in Greg's answer and in Costin's answer and in my answer, you cannot, if you want to develop that intuition, you can't skip the part where you just look at the thing as it is, right? Like that you just build that muscle memory of going, hey, there's a new binary. I don't know what it is. I open it in Hue. I look through the fucking sample. I then go do a couple of other things that I normally do. And then I figure out what I want to do. Do I want to spend time with it or not? And I say this because I used to watch Costin do this at dinner. Like when people started getting boring in their conversations or started to get drunk, if you pay attention, Costin usually opens his laptop like under the fucking table. He's just very sneaky like, right? If you're not paying. And he's just like in FAR Manager and like popping into Hue for each binary and like looks, and then the next one and looks.
In the middle of dinner.
In the middle of dinner. He's having the most fun out of any of us. And so I used to watch him do that at Great, and I'd be like, well, shit, if Costin's still doing that, then that's exactly what I need to be doing too. So what we would do is a new blog would come out, and even if I didn't give a shit about the threat actor, even if it wasn't in my area of interest, even if like there was nothing novel about it, I would pull the samples and I would open them in FAR and I would open them in Hue, and I'd go and I'd just look through it. And then maybe I don't give a shit and I just move on, or maybe I see something interesting and I dig in. But somewhere in your brain, there's some structure that's starting to form from looking at all these things. And you get to a point, and like I say this to like in my Hopkins course, like that's why I buy these folks. Like I used to get them Hue licenses for all the students, because like even though that's not where you're going to do most of your static analysis, it was just like the perfect tool to give you just an overview, just a quick sense, just enough information to be like, I know what this thing kind of is, whether you have time for it or not. And I think that's the best recommendation. That's what AI is going to have to figure out. That's what everyone's going to have to figure out, is how do you keep the right information, ground truth of some sort, popping in front of the eyes of the people that need to become familiar with it.
If you don't have this intuition, is it something you can learn, actively learn? And can you give me an example of big APT or a big discovery that came just from this, that someone without this would never have found this? Give me a sense of what you've run into where the intuition is 90% of it.
I don't have the example ready on hand, so I'm going to like look at Costin, but mostly because I didn't sleep very much, so my memory is pretty shot. But you can absolutely learn it without a shadow of a doubt. And I think you have two. My guess here is that it is learned for pretty much everyone. Like people have different intellectual skills. Like you bring a different capability. Some people are smarter than others for sure. But that thing, that sense of intuition, you don't necessarily bring it in. Like I remember looking at the first sample I ever looked at in Hue, and like we were working the early hacking team days and like in deep cover, secret days. And like I looked through this thing and it didn't make a fucking lick of sense to me. I had no idea what any of it meant. And I kind of put myself through the paces of just doing it for years and years and years, not knowing what the fuck I was doing until I kind of knew what the fuck I was doing. But that sense was being developed. And that's what I try to do in the course, is just to force these new kids to be like, hey, just look at the thing. Just look at even if you don't, I know that you don't get it. It's okay. Just look at the thing and look at the thing. And like, I think Greg is describing something similar with an area that I've never tried, right? Like, I don't know much about like the email protocol and how these things get parsed. And I haven't dealt with JavaScript a whole lot and would rather a model do it for me, which is why I probably have no sense of intuition for any of those cases, period.
Or you still found the FAST16, and I think it's a fantastic case because it's a kind of a confirmation of what I was saying. You need like a combination of things, including tools and big data, because you build the Yara rule to look for Lua, right? And somehow you felt that the things that have Lua in them might be special for some reason, which other people didn't think about. And then you had the capability to search for that Yara rule in a large corpus and find it.
Yeah, it's weird what sticks with you. Go ahead, Greg. Sorry.
The thing I was also going to add is like for like particularly people coming up, like I tie a lot of things back to sports, but like every pro athlete practices significantly more than they actually play the game that they are paid to do. Shout out to the Knicks. Like LeBron James.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. It's like the drill of the free throw drill. You take 1,000 free throws after practice every day. It's kind of like that muscle memory gets.
Yeah, and like basketball is a perfect example because these guys have shoot around where they practice before the game. They have practice on days that they don't play, and they have practice throughout the summer when their season isn't going on. And like I think that the number of like free throws, or it's either free throws or threes that Karl Anthony Towns takes every session is like in the hundreds. Like there's a reason that we have these archetypes for what greatness looks like and proficiency looks like. And I think that's like sports are like a really good way of showing that, but it does the same thing I think that happens in our industry, which is, oh my God, like this Lambert's report, this REMSEC report, this equation report is like amazing, but the audience doesn't necessarily see. And I didn't understand this either until I was like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years ago, was like, no, that you have to go through a lot of stuff and practice a lot until you realize, oh, this is the big game that I was kind of prepping for. Nick Carr, who's I think at Microsoft now, or still at Microsoft, had a great tweet series about this a few years ago, which is, if you're in a SOC or you're doing IR or you're doing threat research and you haven't found something interesting, it's because you either haven't dug deep enough or you haven't been around long enough. You're always going to run into these things. And I think, ironically, to tie it back to your initial point, Ryan, like the email delivery vector comes and goes in waves, both like macro and micro. We have some weeks where it's completely dead and we are all questioning if we are doing our jobs well because nobody's found anything. And then we find things like...
Well, you operate where you have to find things, right? Like you're operating in an environment where if you're not finding things, you're not looking hard enough.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the vibe.
Yes. Yeah. And it definitely feels that way. And it's a little bit competitive within our team, but like sort of like, oh, I saw this crazy thing that Mark found. I have to go like step up. I want to step up my game to find something like that. And I think that like we don't arrive to finding something as interesting and cool as the OWA Reaper malware that is all browser based, has all these like stealth kind of features to it, without looking through like a ton of just junk JavaScript in emails, but also like looking across the landscape on a daily basis, trying to find stuff that interesting. So it's kind of one of those things that like compare how many interesting reports like Juan or Costin has put out compare that to the amount of days that they worked at that entity with that visibility, and you kind of get an idea of like, oh, if they're looking at, like Costin talked about Minev looking at a couple hundred samples a day. I don't know if everybody can do something like that, because I think that takes a specific neurotype and it takes a specific kind of grit that I think everybody else admires, except for Juan, after his shots at Bruce Springsteen last episode.
Fair enough.
The governor has authorized me. I have a drone on site ready to accept your apology. But no, like
never.
I think that there's a like, even if you're only looking at 1 to 2 samples a day, or like whatever your version of that is at your job, like if that is like you're in a SOC and it's like, how many tickets a day are you looking at where you're really like fully understanding why you're investigating this thing? Or like if you're at a MDR and you're looking at these like chains of alerts rather than just one thing at a time, it's sort of mixing up how much depth you get and how much exposure you're getting over time, because I think that's really what, to Juan's point, is going to build that muscle memory. And you have to both stretch it in terms of depth to kind of understand what you're looking at like a really nitty-gritty level, and you have to just do a lot of it. So in the sports world, they would call that a mixture of volume and intensity, but I think you kind of need both.
Mix in five.
Funny that
Good
Greg
book
mentioned
recommendation.
grit. He mentioned grit. I think that is very important. There are like some stories that you just carry with you forever, and you can't just let go, you know. And this is, I think, one of those driving forces between discoveries and revisiting something. You see like some kind of a brief mention of something somewhere, and it kind of stays, you know, at the back of your mind for a decade. And you're like unhappy. You just can't let go that story kind of feels unfinished in your mind. And like you need to somehow to solve it, and, you know, to like let it go. And this is like how a lot of research happens. And this is how like a lot of big cases, like for instance, for me, there is one story that I just can't let go. Like every day I think, how can you pivot on that story? And
Is it Wild Neutron?
Not that one. No, it's the Sineverse hack, like which is one of these stories that never got, I think, fully analyzed one way or another. Huge impact, like millions, billions of SMSs being intercepted at like one of these SMS clearing companies, and there's like no good intelligence into who was behind it. Like of course, the other one being this XZUtils supply chain attack. And I know there's a lot of people out there, all of them trying to solve these like unsolved mysteries that I wrote about before. And this is like the grit. It's like a perfect term to describe the fact that you're not just not, you know, satisfied with what's been put out until this moment.
A good book to recommend here is Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, I think the book was called Outliers. It's this concept that for every great, when greatness is achieved, you have to put in this 10,000 hours of dedicated practice, and unless you get this 10,000 hours, then you can't really get to that outlier level. Pretty good book, good ideas examined there.
There's another book called The Talent Code that kind of, I'm not sure how much Gladwell's gets into it, but it's like similar idea, and it's very much into like the 10,000 hours and how many reps you need to do something truly special, but it gets into kind of the brain chemistry of how it works, which is cool too. Costin, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, I was saying like I had a chance to speak with a Taekwondo master in South Korea, and I asked like, you know, what does it take to become good in something? And he said, you need to practice something like a form 1,000 times before it kind of becomes muscle memory. That's what it takes. Do it 1,000 times, and then you'll do it without thinking. It will become like part of your normal way of life. You'll do it just naturally without even thinking, like faster than anyone, better than anyone. So repetition, like 1,000 times.
Silas always says, I think it's slow is smooth and smooth is fast, something like that. I'm not remembering it perfectly, but there seems to be a lot of the same conventional wisdom that keeps coming around. And like, I'll say this, and like, I didn't want to talk about this because I don't know, like, I didn't want to put you on the spot,
Well, that's
Greg,
terrible.
but like,
You should always want to talk about stuff.
I didn't want to put Greg on the spot on the pod, but like, there's something to be said about just being willing to do the work. And I get that you guys are talking, it's basically just going around the topic of grit over and over again, and it sounds, you know, kind of tiresome in some ways, but I think this is like a really good example. I have a lot of people that have asked me over the years, like, how do I get into this business? Like, how do I get into being an analyst? How do I get better? How do I learn malware analysis? Like, all that shit. And at this point, early on, I would get very invested because I'd be like, oh, this person wants to do this. Like, let me help them out, right? And what happens? You put a lot of energy into it, and it's not like they're lazy, but it's like they're hoping that if you come and like you kind of just bless them the right way and say the right things, that all of a sudden something's going to unlock.
Go to these 5 conferences. Yeah. Give me a list of conferences I need to go to become a threat intel analyst.
Yeah. What trainings? I'm like, look, yeah, that's all good and all. But like what ended up happening over the years, I got a little more disillusioned. And my go-to answer just became read this book. And it's like Practical Malware Analysis, which is like 500 or 600 pages, mostly pictures. Like, it's not that hard to read, but it is like Sikorsky's basic book. And it's the same book I used to teach my course. It's the same book I still tell people to read these days. And by the time I met Greg at Recorded Future, at a very short stint, I was already at that disillusion spot. So Greg comes up and he's like, hey man, like, I really want to like learn more about malware analysis or whatever. And I'm like, read this fucking book or like whatever. And I just, you know, I was a little too disillusioned at that point to like invest the energy. I was just like, yeah, dude, like, let's see. Because most people, you give them the book and they never write you back. They never read the book. They never try the thing at all. It was wild. I bolted out of RF very quickly. And Greg and I would just like run like ships in the night and like conferences. It was amazing to see your trajectory, dude, just like year over year, clearly putting in the reps, which is why, like, if you met me before Great, I had zero background for this. When I met Greg, like, you were already starting to do like analysis work, but you didn't have sort of the technical bit. There is no
shortcut.
I don't know what you're not born with this thing. Like, there's people who are better and worse. Like, you know, Costin's mind is different than everybody else's in special ways. But you also just put in the fucking time with it in a way that anybody can. I think that's the kind of encouraging part in some ways.
Yeah, and like the thing I would add on to that, thank you for the kind words, Juan. That was very nice. And it means a lot to kind of be here with like a bunch of people that I looked up to when I was like, you know, I read like I think I've said it before that I've read Countdown to Zero Day and I read the Equation Report in short order after each other, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but like, then I took a job in a SOC, then I took a job doing IR, and eventually got into kind of the research space. But to Juan's point about like people asking for your advice, something that really stood out to me last week when we found the OWA Reaper thing that was like, I will call it like the pinnacle of my career, because it's the coolest thing that I ever felt like we found. Like, nobody handed this to us, and we analyzed it. We said, oh shit, this is like worth putting out another blog about. But the best part of that was finding and looking at it. It wasn't like, it kind of had to roll my eyes like, oh, we have to put out a blog about this. The timing will work to go on the 3-body problem and kind of talk a little bit about it. But like, it wasn't to be part of this like little parade that we were kind of throwing ourselves. It was like, this is cool. All of this hunting is paid off. And like, if corporate had said like, hey, we don't have space for another blog because we have to get black hat stuff out there, okay, that would have been fine. It would have been enough for me to have like done the work to have found and looked at the interesting thing. And I just don't think that that is always the case when people are asking for these things. I think it's usually a combination of being good enough to have job security, doing something that like is interesting, and glory. And obviously, when you can kind of tie all these things together, it works out really well. But if your favorite part of that, and I would bet that Juan and Costin have kind of a similar thing. If your favorite part of it isn't looking at the malware or looking at the thing, you're not going to have a good time, like a fun time doing it.
Is there an emotional thrill that goes along with that find? Can you describe it? I asked the exploit writers this as well. I remember talking to the exploit writers, and I'm wondering, like, when you finally get your exploit to fire and it's super clean and you just do this and this happens, like, what does that feel like? Can you describe it?
I danced around my office as soon as I knew what it was. Like, I didn't have music playing. I didn't have anything, and I'm like, it like a combination of like half dancing, half like walking, Steph Curry shimmying down the court after he hits a big three. Like it is kind of like a thing that is because there's an amount of luck that comes with it. This isn't like I worked hard, therefore this threat is going to reveal itself to me. You're facing not just one active adversary. You're facing the sea of active adversaries that happen to hit your customer base, and so there's like a big element that is like I was in the right place at the right time, and so it does feel a little bit like a lottery ticket in the sense of like this happened. This thing that I was hoping would happen to us happened to us in finding something big, and so it's elation. It's excitement. It is kind of like I like started a call with our team channel, like, which never happens. That is like, we try and be very good about like doing things over messaging someone before you like just hit them up for a video call. But I couldn't kind of contain myself. So it was, yeah, it definitely is like an excitement and a hype and, at least wanting to share it with the people you're really close with, I think is kind of where the like you almost can't contain yourself with how you're feeling. Like you have to like go show it to other people of like, isn't this thing sick? Like it does, like it's
shit cuts two ways. That shit cuts two ways, Greg. Like I don't know about you, but the amount of times that I would message Costin in the middle of the night being like, I found this fucking awesome thing. And then by the time he would wake up, I was like, never mind. I thought it was cool. Not that cool. Stupid mistake. I'm going to bed now, right? Like that shit happens a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
There are so many, we unfortunately are a Teams shop, not a Slack shop, but I have so many deleted Teams messages of, I think I found something cool and then just, nope. Or there's like a 30% of the time, we have a guy on our team called Mark Kelly who is like, when you talk about someone that just shows up with like this innate talent and like particularly in like, I think the email space, it's obviously really different than looking at compiled binaries, but he just has like a nose for it that I can't like, we build tooling around to try and emulate what he does with like, finding globally rare things at kind of our magnets of threats customers. But, like the amount of times that I've found something that he's already bagged and tagged and like pushed out, it's like, oh, okay. Like guys, this thing is sick. It interacts with, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, oh no, he's already on it. SIGs are in place. Customer, the target got notified. Like we're on to the next thing already. So yeah, that will definitely happen. And you'll have to like reel it back in. And so when you realize that it's real and somebody else validates it, like Juan, I'm sure you could speak to that. Like when you think you found a thing and somebody else responds with, holy shit, this is cool. It like, you kind of get that satisfaction.
That's the dopamine hit, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That's where you're like, okay, I can sink into my chair and I can take a breath and I can like embrace the excitement that's coming along with this instead of just being like kind of holding out hope.
That
Costin,
process...
you remember being excited like that too?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because Costin usually is just his head is in there and he'll give you one of these.
No, but like I'll tell you two things. One is I think that the exploit, like this joy, like euphoria, whatever you call it, the sugar rush, I think it's bigger with the exploit people. Yeah, because it's kind of a lot of effort that goes into a very single moment, and then the moment you crack it, that's like the release of all that energy. With this, I think the hunting process is more like, navigating in the shadows, like developing some tools, like building the arrow, building the bow on the side, like some poison for the arrows, going into the water hole, or like things like that, setting up the trap. So that's not necessarily maybe the kind of joy that you get from the exploits, but nevertheless, of course, it's awesome when you're capable of discovering some kind of a rare animal, or like catching something unusual. But I wanted, like, Greg dropped a very important keyword, and I wanted to ask, in his opinion, how valuable are magnet of threats in his opinion?
know.
And I
I
see,
don't know. You
like,
can drop that phrase without
I
expecting.
see like Citizen Lab like constantly finding things that magnets of threats, like, activists or like a victim of this malware. They also had this other malware which nobody has seen before. It turns out that this other malware is even more interesting than the first malware. So, what are the magnets of threats, and like how important are they?
So we actually so Nick Atfield on our team built what a tip system that we call Malcop to do basically exactly this analysis. And it got named Malcop for an incredibly dumb series of reasons, but it's sort of like Synapse light. Partly because like the email space is so like it's transactional in a way that is not like, we don't need a full SIM or a full tip for it, because there's a sender, there's a subject, there are any attachments, any links. It's a pretty easy thing to model relatively. And so we were able to look and see like how disproportionately targeted are some of our customers with espionage actors. And it's like less than 1% of our customers get an espionage targeting notification. So anytime we see an APT actor throwing emails against our customer base, we do a notification to go along with it. Partly because if they're targeting specific individuals, those users might get targeted on their personal accounts, and they should be made aware that they are subject to that kind of targeting. And so we kind of churn those numbers, and however many customers we have, it's like maybe 24 of them see more than 2 or 3 distinct like espionage clusters over time, and there's like 10 that have seen like, I think it's like 5 plus, and then I think there's 4 of them that have seen 10. Each of them have seen 10 different APTs hitting them. So like the magnet concept is really prevalent in our data, where it's like less than 1% of our customers see get more than one APT notification over the course of our like history of doing that. So going back like 10 years, and then it's all like hyper focused at kind of a subset, a very small subset of customers that you can kind of count on a couple of hands.
And the email vector is also like, I mean, it gives you like the perfect spot to be doing like your monitoring and so on.
Yeah, it's definitely like it's easy. I will say it's easier to find who is interesting to the espionage actors, because there are subject lines and who they're spoofing, and like not even just who's getting targeted, because we don't have perfect insight into that, but like you kind of get what topics kind of come along with that, because there is a social engineering aspect that comes along with 98% of them. So there is like you can infer a lot more about what both the actor and the recipient kind of care about.
Sorry, Juan, I interrupted you twice. I apologize.
No, you're fine. Please. I'm thinking about a lot of things here, right? Like something that you mentioned, Greg. You and I were like raving about how many times we fucked up, right? Like how many times we think we have something great and then you realize you don't. I think that's a really important part of the process that gets glossed over. That I don't know how much other industries in the information space have this, but like we do tend to eat crow a lot in this process, right? When you're doing threat hunting, when you're trying to, even if it's, there's I found something I thought was a true positive, but it's a false positive. I found something that is a true positive, it is malware, but it isn't interesting. I found something that, I thought was related to something, but it isn't. And thereby it's not that interesting. I over pivoted and I fell off a fucking cliff. There's all these different ways that you fuck up. And I think that's a big part of developing that intuition we were talking about, is just how many times you have misstepped and and when somebody else does something similar, you can look at it and be like, hey friend, just letting you know, like, I've been down that path, and this smells an awful lot like you might be sort of over pivoting on this thing. Tying it all together with the systems thinking thing that people were asking about, what Costin was describing in contrasting what the vuln research people do, everything for this one payoff, versus what we do on the threat hunting side, there's a lot of opportunity for cumulative gains. Like taking the time to say, we do this thing, Mark Kelly does this kind of genius, Minev does this kind of genius hunting. What if I actually stop working for 2 weeks and build this system or write this rule or come up with this pipeline that now does what this person brilliantly does, but all of the time, or over this giant data set, or as a service to my team? Those things are very easy to gloss over. They're seldom incentivized by companies or management unless they're research managers and they can understand the value of it. But from a systems thinking perspective, that's the kind of investment into something that will provide cumulative, like compounding returns over time. And the earlier you do it, the more you are going to benefit. It's like putting money in your 401k, right? Like you're going to benefit from that greater and greater from having done it earlier and earlier on. So that's something that I'm always happy to hear about, and I'm always happy to incentivize it, more so even now with the AI, magic, where it's like, hey, it doesn't really take 2 weeks anymore. Maybe if I just spent 4 hours on this, I could probably get this down. But it's a joy that we get to have of setting up that Yara rule for Lua and like pulling out this giant base of samples, and then weeks or months or years later being like, oh shit, we started processing with this other thing, and look, this bucket that I collected 4 years ago that I forgot all about, look at this little gold nugget that was in there and I had no way of seeing it. And it's part of the compounding returns of, I was trying to hunt on something new today, but also I did it over the bucket that I pulled out 4 years ago because I invested in this other thing because we did this whatever before based on the thing from 6 years ago, right? Like it's kind of hard to describe, but there's a lot of gains there.
Yeah, and I think to what Costin has said on a previous episode of like, you can be a magnet for good luck if you are doing all those things, right? Like one of the things, like Clem gave a talk, I think at Hexacon, about how they are finding O-Day at Google. And it was one of those things that was like,
that was
none
great.
of it like, none of it like was crazy surprising. He has a slide deck out there for his talk at Thinkst too. Yeah, that shows how he's using Yara to do that. That I kind of spent hours Googling for to kind of surface.
I haven't seen that talk. Where was that?
I'll send you the link, or I'll post the link into one of the chats somewhere.
Right. Yeah, please.
And the video's online, but he doesn't give it in English. I, of course, this was like, I think I found it like a year ago. And I paid some AI service to try and transcribe it for me, and it was so bad. But it didn't work. I'm sure something would do that now. But like, one of the things that I really admired about it was I didn't get the sense that Tag and Google and now GTIG would stop finding O-Day or interesting things if Clem left. And like, I hope he doesn't. I greatly admire him. He's actually been a really good collaborator on all these cross-site scripting, half-click exploit threats. But there's something admirable about the fact that like what Minev did, what Clem is doing, where it's like, oh, these systems are going to live on, and like you are going to continue to benefit from like what these analysts kind of have as insight. And like as someone that has done something similar to that before, still seeing detections and pipelines running to put research out for companies I used to work for, it's like, okay, cool. Like you get a nice piece of satisfaction about that. And by the way, like for anyone that's kind of fighting for trying to figure out their space in this industry, putting out big research isn't necessarily the thing that's going to get you promoted. Enabling your team to be as effective as your best members is probably going to be the thing that is like, hey, everybody liked that. Everybody's going to, like obviously we do some of this for praise because we all have egos. But like you want to get promoted, it's like everybody says like you got to be a team player and do all this cross team stuff. If you can just take follow around someone you know in one of those teams that is the best at something, see how they do it, and see if you can take like even just a sliver of that and make that easy for every other analyst in your team to apply that in a super streamlined way. And suddenly, like not only are they all going to be benefit and you're going to find cooler stuff and be more effective at your jobs, but I think you can also take that satisfaction of like you're part of what is helping that entity scale to do better and better work versus just being like a talent driven organization where like,
Yeah.
hey, our efficacy on this thing is going to drop if this person leaves, so we have to throw more money at them.
I think that's a great, that's an amazing way to go from, hey, how do I become a good researcher, to, hey, how do I become a leader of an organization? And then more importantly, and this feels, almost egotistical to say, but like it is also a part of like, how do you create a legacy in some way?
Leave
like for
something
me,
behind.
yeah, for me, the idea of like, we worked our ass, like, look at Chronicle, right? We hired all the right people. We created the uppercase research team. I had legends with me, right? You had Silas, you had St. Myers, you had Brandon Levine, and so on. And we did amazing work. We walked out and it was done. Like it was just cratered. There was nothing left because we didn't have the opportunity or the encouragement, the connection within the org, the empowerment to take any of what we were doing that was like amazing research capability and bake it into the system. Not the product, but just the system, the way that things work internally in that way. It's been really different for me at Sentinel-1 and like building Sentinel Labs. It's like this dual track of how do you make things that have like repeatable benefits that will continue to accrue, and how do you help people grow to have continuity, right? Like I'm very proud of the work I've done at Labs, but I don't want Labs to die the day that like I get hit by a bus or like someone, finally blows up my car over an APT, or more realistically, I choke on a packet of ketchup, right? Like it shouldn't end the team. It shouldn't end the research. And that's why like I'm really proud of seeing folks like Tom Hagel and St. Myers and everybody who like are holding down the fort. I might even take a vacation someday. But all of these things are interwoven in a very interesting way from everything we've been talking about, right? Like from like, how do I become a decent researcher, to then like, how do I become a leader that's actually empowering people? Building these systems is a part of that. It gets you out of that scarcity mindset of, oh, only this genius person can find these things and we're all beholden to them, and God, you better hope they don't leave. That's a short-sighted tactic, as opposed to building the thing that's worth investing into.
Yeah, and what happens if you're the one empowering that genius, right? Like, what happens if you give LeBron James an ability to play until he's 50 instead of 40, right? Like there's an amount of like this can't go on, Ryan. He's going to be 30 someday. But like there's an element of like, how do you maximize both the output of that special person on a day-to-day basis, and how do you like reduce overhead for them and the whole team to keep them in the game longer, right? Like this isn't again, like with the pro sports analogy, like do you want to be someone like Derrick Rose who has a great rookie season and then it kind of falls off because of injury, or do you want to be someone that has like a 20 or 30 year, like I look at Costin as someone like to admire in that space of like he's still putting out great research all these years later.
Costin, LeBron James of threat intel.
Yeah, that's an apt analogy. And
the LeBron James.
But I think to contrast what you said about Chronicle Juan, like there's and Ryan, I'm sorry that I'm like asking all these questions and bogarting the podcast with my own thoughts, but
all yours.
You've been invited to Bogart, bro.
I might
Bogart
get to go
away.
Because I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about your legacy at Great, because I like it's not like that team stopped putting out good research when all you guys left whenever you did, right? Like there's obviously systems that went into it that you've alluded to before, but I think there's also like a cultural impact that you have when it's like, no, we're actually like a team and we pick up and make sure that we are covering when someone isn't able to make it. We are going to carry on this like important, to the word that Juan used, legacy. Like we set a standard of excellence and we want to keep aspiring to that. And that's not like this group of people happen to have a hot hand and now they're all gone. Like, no, we want to take up that mantle. And like that, to be honest, that's where our team kind of came in into Proofpoint, was we knew that there was a legacy of really talented people that came here before us, and how can we kind of build on the shoulders of what they have. But yeah, I specifically Costin, but I think the rest of you guys, like, what is the...
Both of those guys are younger than me. What are we talking about legacies? Don't give me none of the old man talk.
Ryan, you look the youngest on this podcast, so...
Yeah,
Costin, great question. It's a great question. I would love for Costin to jump in here and talk about leaving legacies behind, but just kind of like the idea of putting those building blocks in place where you left there was Alice, there was all these tools that became an important part of how the team operated as a whole.
I think what Greg was saying about empowering people is the most important thing. When you're building a threat intel team or any team in general, you need to start with some kind of a foundation, and you need to give everyone the tools to do their job. And some of those tools you can buy. So you may buy, let's say, an IDA license for everyone, or a Hue license, or a WinRAR license. That was a joke. And some of those tools you have to develop yourself.
Please
you have to develop them from scratch. And I think that a lot of teams, they lack this kind of foundation and the base on which you later build. And I'll just give you the most basic example is a local legitimate malware collection. I spoke with many people in different companies who don't have a malware collection of their own. They may have like some samples somewhere, or maybe some other samples are on a share, some other samples are on my hard drive here. And other people, I don't know, they have like a memory stick right here with the like interesting samples, but you don't have like a joint malware collection.
Man is throwing darts.
Yeah, he's just like lifting. Look, a new APT right here.
Like,
look, an entire campaign on my
like
desk.
The most interesting samples, like malware samples ever discovered. It's like
he
right
drops
here.
it. He's like, oh, sorry, I lost it. Right?
Oops.
No big deal. Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. But you need the foundation. You need a foundation, and the foundation consists of knowledge databases, like structuring knowledge in a way that is accessible and easily accessible for everyone is one of the most important things. You may have huge amounts of information, but it's like completely useless if it takes forever to search it for something. If you have, however, maybe like a selected database of information, or you have multiple databases for different purposes that you can search instantly and then connect through some APIs together with other systems, that is when the magic happens. So you need to start by building these knowledge systems and making them easily accessible to everyone. I think that is the foundation that you need in pretty much any kind of a team. And the legacy is essentially people building on top of those, because this will not, let's say, be unique forever. Like everyone will have this foundation at some moment in time, but let's say by the moment that you um, are in competition with others and everyone has the foundation, you already like 3 levels up with your Babel tower or whatever you're building with the pyramid. So you, by let's say by the time everyone has a malware collection and code similarity and let's say tag network indicators, you already have, I don't know, AI powered anomaly recognition and magnet of threats identification and tagging, and automatic sample analysis based on memory dumps anomalies coupled with the new rules creation on the fly by the AI and deployed to all your customers transparently.
That's the TLP black ad.
Maybe.
TLP
Yeah,
black,
yeah.
TLP black. That's TLP
It's
black.
always like you need to be careful, like in revealing too many ideas, because like someone will listen to the podcast and they'll just go there and vibe code it, and it will be ready tomorrow, and kill like your startup ideas. So maybe it's, I don't know, it's a part of that.
I wouldn't worry about that.
I wouldn't worry. The other thing
I
is,
wish more people did that. To be honest with you, yeah.
To Costin's point, we have like on our team, we have 2 platforms. Like, I use that term not lightly, based on nuggets that you guys dropped during the Minev tribute episode. So, like,
awesome.
you got to listen. There are gems getting dropped in this space all the time. If you're those that are willing to listen. But I'm also not trying to sell these things. I'm just trying to find more evil.
Look, that's the best legacy for Minev. Of all things that he could have possibly inspired, more hunting systems is precisely what it should be.
So you build 2 systems, one with customer data and one with open data, or like which nugget do you refer to?
You drop some nuggets now.
You can't just say that. Now Costin's like, tell us about these systems, yeah?
So I'm gonna have to obfuscate one of them because it's mostly somebody else's implementation. I was
Don't
just
get
a good
fired.
idea.
Whatever you do, don't get fired.
No. So it's one is on like the email delivery side. How do you find what is unique and only hitting magnets of threats at the same time? Finding anomalies in email is actually really hard because it turns out that like every email is traffic, and every bit of email traffic is technically anomalous, right? Like you might have a spam email that's hitting all these other customers at the same time. That's pretty easy to weed out. But what about something that's just junk that is hitting 100 million other email addresses, but only one in our data? Like, how do you kind of do that? So we have a system that we use to try and spear the fish, as we put it, that we call Harpoon, that is working to like find that convergence and find basically low prevalence things in interesting places. And we have another one that I'm actually trying to implement in a virus total style thing, which is like, how do you use the constellation of signatures that fired as its own detection basis? I won't say much more than that, but like, how do you like take the combination of signals as they exist as a metric to kind of weed out things that are hyper prevalent and look for only things that are pretty rare.
That shit's great. I mean, and we've worked on some stuff like that, even on the S1 detection side. But like all these things, it's like you gain these little insights, and if you abstract away enough, they all look very similar. But then the specific implementation in your systems with the particulars of emails versus, binaries versus whatever, that's where the real magic has to happen. But think about like, you'll have the benefit of like being able to take noisier false positive written rules that you probably shouldn't surface detections for, but in connection, compound rules can have a much different sort of detection thresholds, and there's so many gains there. Like, that's actually fucking great to hear. I can keep nerding out on this, but Ryan, I feel like you're trying to pull us.
One more thing I wanted to say.
Yeah.
One more thing.
Please.
In pretty much any kind of threat hunting operation, what matters a lot, and it's so funny to see, like you were saying, there's like generation coming after another generation after another generation. And pretty much everyone kind of forgets what the previous generation has worked on, and they kind of try to rebuild things from scratch, or like maybe overlook the importance of a particular thing. And like one of the most important things, in my opinion, are clean reference sets of any kind, be it clean samples, clean file names, clean IP addresses, clean domains. When you want to do anomaly hunting, having a solid, clean foundation is one of the most important things. I wanted to pitch one project from one of our friends, Mr. Stefan Tanase, who just launched a website called top1m.org, where he produces a top of the most popular. Yeah, it's top1m.org, where he produces like a ranking of the top 1 million most popular websites, similar in a way to what Umbrella has or Alexa. What is different is a methodology that he uses. I already integrated with his website. I highly recommend, if you're into anomaly hunting, look at what he has in there. It's a gold mine of information because of the methodology that he uses to produce this top. But in general, having a good, solid, clean database is so important when you do anomaly hunting.
I had a question for Greg. Right along the same lines. Is like, Proofpoint is a big company. What, you guys have 5,000 plus employees. I imagine there are silos everywhere. They're doing a million things everywhere. That's how it operates at these big companies. Like, can you talk a little bit about the walls or the lack of walls that exist from like your spot to the product team, and how all of this actually feeds detection engineering in a way that's meaningful? Do they actually lean on you for like new techniques and so on? How does that work? Is that a seamless process? Is it something you're working through? Like, help me understand how it works. And do you feel like you're actually meaningfully contributing to what the product looks like for customers on the back end?
Yeah, and this actually ties into, I think, something that just got said about like what a team has done before. Andrew Thompson on Twitter has talked about this, like understanding like the history of a team is really important. And so the threat research org at Proofpoint was originally tied to efficacy. And like it was probably the only research function that I'm aware of that was built crime first. Because guess what? Like measuring efficacy on how many Emotet maldocs get delivered is a pretty straightforward thing to kind of judge. And so we were heavily integrated with a key detection team inside of our pipeline. That being said, I'm going to obfuscate this a little bit, but detecting the inline cross-site scripting stuff has been a battle for about 18 months. And that's partly because of how it's hidden. It's partly because like, how do you define what customer data is? Is the message body of an email customer data or not? Does that mean that downstream detection systems can touch it or not? And so we found our answer of where to detect it in. And after we do this announcement, we get all of this like fanfare. We are part of like our corporate quarterly update to talk about this thing. All of a sudden, other folks in like the spam detection engines, which is like what we were primarily originally built to do, they're coming out of the woodwork and saying, "Oh, I think that we might have a way to use what we're doing to help what you're doing." I wouldn't have known how to even look some of these people up and that those systems could do those things until this big kind of thing happened. So I would say it's kind of always happening because for everything for us, it's kind of a pipeline of there's a team in charge of like how the thing flows through the network. There are people that are in charge of each kind of part of the spam engine and detection stacks. So it's not just like a singular thing. And so it's definitely a labor of love, and like the getting to a high amount of efficacy and what good detections on these things has taken not only a lot of hours, but a lot of meetings with like people that are doing product stuff.
Fucking meetings.
Yeah. Like if you want to find cool stuff, get ready to go to meetings with people that aren't interested in helping you, and convincing them that they are interested in helping you. And so like there is some of it that is, Ryan, to your point, like, It's not streamlined. We are very integrated in with a very specific part of our pipeline on the malware specific part of things, but on kind of like the generic how do you determine an email is malicious we have a relatively complex answer for that, and the complexity with that means that there are a lot of people that you kind of have to go to hat in hand and saying, I think I have this thing that we want to detect, like, can you help me? And now that they hear about it on a company update, and we can be like, look, NSA and all these other countries care about this. It's made it a little bit easier to kind of make those inroads. But yeah, it definitely wasn't a like, I can throw a hunting rule out here and go to town.
You just touched on one of the most powerful levers that the public sector, that the government has, that they very seldom employ, which is, it's amazing how much runway and how much investment a simple acknowledgement from the government will buy you. Like, when you think about how much we're talking about investing in research teams and things that don't necessarily have immediate applicability, don't necessarily have immediate ROI, even though we all know there will be those compounding gains if you actually invest into it. It can be so hard to buy that runway. And having a tweet where CISA goes, oh my God, Sentinel-1 did this amazing thing, where NSA puts like the Proofpoint logo, and like in the US, they talk about vendor favoritism, and like there's been a lot of like this thing of rejecting giving any sort of sense of sponsorship to specific companies, which in our space is ridiculous when we all have very unique visibility. You have people that are really disproportionately investing into getting that research done. And it's not like you can, if I publish something, you're not going to go to CrowdStrike and find the same thing. Maybe they'll have their own version eventually, but like it's not the same thing. So that's a lever that I hope the government will keep getting more and more lenient, if not like enthusiastic about leveraging. Because being able to go to your CEO and saying, look, it's working, the government likes what we do, everyone can see that we're the authoritative source of blah, blah, blah for this and that. Whether it's in a Senate hearing or on literally or a tweet, it makes a massive difference for what you're willing to, like what you're capable of unlocking with those executives.
We're an hour and a half in, and I gotta get to a million other things, and I also want to close the loop on a few things quickly, Greg, so it doesn't get lost. What is next for this Zimbra OWA research, this Laundry Bear thing? What's meat on the bones you've left for the rest of us to pick at? IOX, can you talk a little bit about what's next? What's the next stage of advancing this research?
So, yeah, I think that there's a lot out there. The thing that is hard about this is I'm not sure who is well positioned, because especially the OWA Reaper stuff lives in the browser. I think that like the EDR and the AV companies can go back and look at the infrastructure, because that's been up since March. I suspect that Laundry Bear had this Outlook XSS as a 0-day, and they've been using this toolkit since March. It took until they came into our data the day before there was a big bunch of blogs about them to show themselves to us. But I think there's probably a lot of meat on the bone of like, we don't know what like the command issuance emails looked like. We don't know what like the GitHub repos that they're using for C2, because they basically generate a victim ID that gets sent back to Laundry Bear. That's in sort of a complex way through image rendering CDNs and stuff, and then that victim will then query for the ID they generated on GitHub. So we could generate a random victim ID, but I don't know like the exact ID to query, so I don't know how to necessarily go and find commands. So I think there's a lot of meat on the bone for folks that like ingest and mine GitHub to find those things, whether that's the GitHub team or whether that's like someone who also can do it downstream, on like how long this has been happening. Has it been active since March? And like what kind of commands were they running? Like, I think that's the thing that will keep this in the back of my brain for a long time is like, A, this is like a browser implant that is built for long-term access. But I don't think it's the end state. Like, I suspect, and this is purely speculative. This is not what Proofpoint thinks or what my analytical assessment is. But I would suspect that they are in the browser waiting for either the right combination of sandbox escapes to get onto the host, or more accurately, get into Exchange properly. Like, I think that they can basically compromise users at an Exchange level. But that isn't the same thing as like totally compromising the mail server in the way that like Turla has in the past, and being able to read an entity's entire slate of email. And like, to be honest, they are, like, timing wise, it wouldn't shock me if we stumbled into something like that getting patched, not because they are abusing it or because like it's just how the world works, but because all of a sudden, like, not only are all these external entities using LLMs to improve their vuln research speed and their exploit development, but Microsoft is doing that too. So I think that it's just kind of a, like, I don't know if waiting game is the right term, but I would suspect that they would be doing something interesting like that after landing like this and being in there for a while. So there's a ton of left on the bone to go and find, like, how long has this been active? What do commands look like? What happens after they've determined an infection is interesting. Like, do they exfiltrate emails? How do they actually operate once they land?
Is there a technical fix that Microsoft can do? Is there a technical fix we can expect for half clicks in as an exploitation thing? Is that I mean, are we just exposed to this forever?
My hope is that if we get into Glasswing, which I have no idea if we've even applied, or some entity wants to take that on and say, hey, all these open source webmail providers like Zimbra, Roundcube, that a bunch of legitimate important entities rely on because it's free, because it's well maintained and stuff. Can you just point this problem at a GPT 5.6 Soul? I don't know all the numbers, I'm sorry, but like Fable, Soul, or whatever, and be like,
Juanito's got you, don't worry.
yeah. But like, I think this is actually the perfect thing for that, because it's something you can test and know immediately if what they're talking about is actually real. And like, patching wise, it is not going to be that complex. And so I think that it's probably something for one of these kind of like longer reasoning models to see, like, hey, let me sit with this code base, because most of them are out there, and churn through it and see if we can patch all of this kind of like HTML handling so that when you render something, JavaScript's just never running. So
like
probably,
turning off preview pane mode, does that automatically mitigate this?
I'm going to be honest with you, I have no idea. Maybe, but I'm not sure.
Why do we dismiss and discount cross-site scripting issues as just like, low-hanging fruit that nobody cares about, when these kinds of outcomes are, I mean, it's just a thought that popped into my head that whenever something pops up as cross-site scripting, it gets dismissed as something silly. And you see threat actors just mining this for gold.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that I was kind of dismissive of too when I first like read that it was cross-site scripting. I was like, oh, that's like a 90s thing, right? Like, I wasn't in the game. It was sort of like, okay, boomer, like cross-site scripting is an important vector. And like, some of it is that I would say that most analysts in our space could be handed one of these emails and told, like, hey, there's something weird in here, and they could figure out what's happening. So there isn't a really high bar for like interpreting what's going on. Like, hey, should this JavaScript run? Probably not. Should it interact with all these backend APIs and send it somewhere that isn't in the victim's infrastructure? Probably not. And so I think that like lack of like complexity, where it doesn't take like someone that has to look in a disassembler for hours to understand it, isn't like, it's sort of the fruit that like, I don't want to point fingers at you guys like doing this and interpreted like on purpose, but we put out some of the most amazing papers in our space are about compiled binaries where there is like all these embedded function or all this embedded functionality that is like, whether it's in a VFS or if it's in all these like really complex things that like your first couple years looking in IDA or Binja, you're not going to necessarily be able to interpret and understand it. So there's kind of the industry has kind of set a high bar for like what these apex actors are doing. And so when something seems this simple, like, oh, this is JavaScript that like not only can an LLM interpret it, like a human can interpret it like pretty easily. I think that like that facet of it is why like not that I don't think it gets looked down on by any means, like but I think it was kind of like initially dismissed, and I think it just happens to be back in vogue because these webmail providers are vulnerable to it, and it's working. And like, you know, as much as I wanted to find like a cross-platform malware that was like embedded in all these systems for years and decades and stuff, right? Like you kind of have to do what the adversary is giving you on a day-to-day or year-to-year basis. So they obviously don't look down their nose at it, so we shouldn't either.
Costin, last words on this Laundry Bear research? Do they qualify for like research of the year? Costin has his list already compiling about like, you know, annual research projects.
It's definitely one of the most interesting ones, and I have like a thought. I don't know if I should ask it. Like maybe it's not politically correct.
We don't fact check. We don't fact check.
Mm-mm. But like, what if we get, I don't know, sanctioned or something?
That's fine.
How do you synchronize your publication with the NSA? How do you get like a publication at the same time?
There. Got it.
Asking and begging and pleading and emailing once a week on updates. So like effectively we got told like, hey, you guys can kind of publish whenever, and as long as it's out there and we have a URL, we can cite it.
But wait, there's a communication point where you went to them and say, I have this.
Yeah, so we got, I will, because I don't want to like break any rules or ruin any relationships. Like we got in touch with each other in December when we basically had a blog already written, ready to go. Ryan, I know you're next. You didn't get to ask the Kim Zetter question of how do we find it and how and all that stuff.
I just found it Costin.
So yeah, there's Costin, to answer it like directly is we basically said like, hey, we can publish whenever you guys want. When do you want to? And there was a 4 or 5 month period of like, next 30 to 60 days we'll have a date, and you just kind of sit on your hands and you keep looking for the actor, and you kind of get lulled into this like, I don't know, it's like the easiest way I could say to think about it is like if you're thinking about someone you have a crush on, you keep thinking about them and you try and distract yourself, like, are they going to text me back or whatever? And you eventually just develop enough patience that when the day comes, you get excited about it. But yeah, it took a lot of kind of coordination and making sure that like they could cite a work that they could reference that wasn't already out there. Like in particular, like in their PDF and stuff. And so there were kind of like a lot of those things, that like coordinating with them, because we like coordinating on the threat and the analysis was really easy because that's like, you're talking to your peers, but then we both kind of have like all sides of it have to go up their chains, be like, hey, we want to release this thing alongside this other entity. And so it was like, I think like being patient with the coordination was kind of the best answer I have with that. And also like not jumping the gun and being like, let's just get it out there. Cause then we don't have this like to what Juan said before, like this internal political cachet that comes with publishing it together.
Was there anxiety or nervousness that someone would find it in between this months of waiting window and just screw up your entire thing?
So after we collaborated, a small company called SecRite blogged about one of the emails they found on VT.
There we go.
And so there was, and like we had like our little, we got on a call with everybody that was involved and had our little like sob fest of like, it's just one email, like.
We're all good. We're still good.
The thing that was actually trippy about it that I'm adjusting my assessment on is days later, all that Zimbra exploitation infrastructure burned down, and the actor pulled it. This was in February, and so we thought that they got skittish, and they were like, "Oh, we only have this one. We have one pitch." And we can't like let the C2s fall into the wrong hands or whatever, because the infrastructure, all the infrastructure, even from the earliest campaigns, was still up. Until this Outlook campaign started, that was my assessment. Now, the Outlook campaign may have started in mid-March. So it kind of stands to reason that they didn't necessarily, maybe they got spooked by the blog a little bit, but potentially more accurately, or what also could have happened, I should say, is that they just had this exploit and a significantly better malware kit to hit a bigger and more interesting set of targets in the Outlook install base. And so my suspicion now is that a combination of that blog and having a new operation to start was what spurned that. But yeah, the anxiety of like that publication and the nervousness with like waiting to like, is this thing gonna like? I asked myself like once a week, is this thing gonna happen, or am I like, am I just like?
We've all been there, my friend.
Yeah,
We've been there with every report for this.
And before ESET scoops you.
That was a real concern because Matthew Fau was like the godfather of finding these things. And so it was like, thankfully I was like really early on when we found this stuff, we got to collaborate with him and a guy called Alex Landstein, who is a legend in the like finding espionage and email data stuff. I'm like trying to get him to come talk to our team about like his big picture thoughts about it. He was at FireEye forever. I think he like helped build like their
startup now. Right?
Yeah, Strike Ready.
Yeah.
So he's a good dude, but we got to collaborate with all of them. And one of the upsides of collaboration is that if you bring something to the table, ironically,
you get
Alex
something back.
Well, not only do you get something back, so Alex was the one that had originally, when the question was going to come up that I thought you were going to ask of how did we find this? Ironically, Alex
my
Landstein,
man prepped for this podcast. I told you not to prepare.
Like, they're going to ask.
So ironically, about a week before we found it, Alex Landstein tipped us to it and was like, hey, there's this thing out there. So I wrote a bunch of rules and was waiting for it to hit. The thing he tipped us on and the rules that I wrote never triggered. But we had these other signatures that we're looking for. Some of them are on VT. We mine for every upload of an email that contains like a government TLD. Free game out there. And then looking for these like heuristics based rules both in our data and on VT. And those things kind of converged of finding the Zim Reaper campaign the first time, I think in like September or October of last year. So yeah, it was kind of like both in-house data, external data, and then it was one of those things where like I think Alex should get partial credit on our blog that we couldn't really sneak in there because for a variety of reasons, because we were already like thanking the FBI and all these other things, but like
shout out to Alex.
Yeah,
he gets a shout out now.
He'd seen it first, and he just like, but he's seen so many interesting things in his time. He just kind of tipped it over in this little chat and was like, "Yeah, have you guys seen this? It's kind of interesting, whatever." And I'm like, "Alex, we saw this thing a week later. This is going to be like the biggest thing I do next calendar year. You just don't know it yet." And he's like, "Yeah, whatever. Like seeing this thing, so
you can have it. It's cool. Whatever."
Yeah.
Noticeable that there's no mention of Microsoft at all. Is there any sort of communication around the Outlook web access possible? I don't know if you call it a vulnerability, a weakness. What is?
Yeah, so it's definitely a vuln. They patched it in May. I think that they patched it in response to the Laundry Bear activity. I'm not sure. Like when it's like one of those things where like I have a bunch of like people I would call friends at Microsoft, and I don't want to put them in a position to be like, can you tell me something I really shouldn't know that isn't critical for me protecting my customers? Like, was this these guys back then? But they're aware they have a patch in for it. Like our best guidance that we have in any of these blogs is to update your software. And we definitely did some like pre-publication notification to them of like, hey, we're seeing this, we're putting this out there, just to kind of be like good neighbors on the internet.
Any other devil's advocate questions, Costin?
No. I think I'm fine.
Thank you. You
I
sure?
didn't want to
It's
put
okay.
Greg on the spotlight.
No,
It
it's
was just
fine.
like, one of those frustrations sometimes, right? Like how do you synchronize like such a big release with government agencies across 15 countries, something like that?
Yeah.
I think it's just a different game. It's a different set of gains. It takes a different mentality, right? Like, what do you want to win? Are you looking to win the researcher race where we're like, I was the first one to lick this donut, it's mine, or are you willing to wait and essentially get the brass ring in a way that's going to be more memorable, right? And look, let's be clear, we're talking about the game as the game right now. This isn't about like protecting customers and whatnot. That comes way before that, right? Like we're talking about publications, we're talking about getting credit, we're talking about building up that store of political capital that you're going to use, if you've got good leadership that you're going to use to support the team further and get more resources and so on and so forth. That has nothing to do with the defending of these people, but like the gov gets to play such a special role there. I'm hoping this is the beginning of more of this stuff. Not that they haven't been doing it, but like it's great to see this much featuring, this much like, hey, these dudes did great work, we're doing great work with them, instead of what we used to see from like CISA, for example, where they would stop, wait 3 months, redo the work themselves so that they could do it through, they'd send it to farm it out to some contractor. And then once it was useless and once it was like completely redone, 3 months later, 6 months later, you get a report. There's like a link maybe somewhere in a footnote and like no mention of like where all this stuff came. That makes it so it's not worth investing. That makes it so it's not worth waiting. But if you're going to get the kind of recognition that like, Greg's team just got, and like you can look forward to that, it's worth sucking it up. Even if ESET scoops you, being able to come out and have that at the end of the day, it's going to do a lot more for you in the long run. Right?
A Ryan question quickly. Did you guys report into marketing? Are you funded by marketing?
That's a great question. So our to peel back the curtain a little bit, our C-suite is chief strategy officer. When he like pried away the intel function to put under him, he was CMO. So there's kind of been this running joke of like, we report to marketing and the engineers all report to engineering. He's like his name's Ryan Calber. He's like an old school like InfoSec guy. Who like we love reporting into, and we are like, the way that I would describe our mission is both putting research out there to like keep Proofpoint on the forefront of like the email security provider, but also that we are like QA for our detection stack, because we are the ones that are like mining the telemetry in that, and they are really aligned with that. So our like the strategy, not put words in his mouth, is like keep our name out there and keep the quality of the product high, because we're the ones that are like in the data kind of day to day. It's not like somebody else is like tipping us to stuff in our own data. It's kind of like done ourselves. So marketing is definitely like a big part of like the output,
mission,
but there's like I would say that the vast majority of our like 50-person team is behind the scenes doing like the QA and hunting work that doesn't get the same kind of spotlight that we're shining on ourselves right now.
All right, guys, we're at 2 hours in, and now I'm going to get to the main story. How are we doing? How are we holding up?
Do you
good?
need to pee? Is that what you're saying? Do you
I
need us
will
to hold
leave
down
as
the
soon as I
fort
ask
for a
this
little
question.
bit? Yeah, it's like I
No,
told you to
quickly, I
pack a
thought
bottle or something, man.
I thought the big story this week, outside of Greg's appearance and the Laundry Bear stuff, was going to be Hugging Face publishing like a very detailed postmortem with some pretty cool graphics and so on. That like kind of opened our eyes to it was not only Hugging Face that turned into that was a victim here. The bot had compromised at least 3 additional companies. OpenAI updated their blog. I thought that was going to be the big story, until we got a like, hey, look over here, me too. Anthropic drops a blog post saying, hey, listen, we went back after this OpenAI incident and did a retrospective review of about 141,000 cybersecurity evaluation runs, and we found 3 incidents where Claude models access the real internet from within test environments and compromised 3 organizations' production systems. This is what it's supposed to do, Juanito? Do we have a guardrailing man management problem? What on earth is going on?
Go pee. So, honestly, this is a very big story. It has been like I've been having to pop on the news and everything just to kind of like dispel a bit of the insanity around it, but I also think it's a kind of ridiculous story in some ways and not a surprising one at all, right? Basically, if I were to tell this story to other practitioners, the whole of it is sandboxing, like bad sandboxing tech allows things to happen outside of sandbox, right? Like, and when you put it that way, there's really nothing all that fucking crazy about it. But when you spin it from the AI side, what we're discussing here is, well, oh my God, the model, and it went and it hacked a place it wasn't supposed to, and it, access to resource it wasn't supposed to, and it did crazy shit that it shouldn't do in order to accomplish its goals. It did. Well, I would argue that shouldn't do in that is it's doing a lot of work because and we discussed this on the last podcast, it is not, this was an eval. You're purposefully removing those guardrails. You're purposefully asking it to accomplish this goal of exploiting or producing, having RCE, getting through these benchmarks. It is not the way it should do it. And that's part of what you're trying to train into the models. You're saying, hey, that's maybe reward hacking. Maybe, you're trying to go about it in this or that way that isn't actually the way that that truly solves this this benchmark or that is desirable behavior. But essentially, in this particular case, what we're seeing is these models have gotten really, really good to the point where they, of course, are trying to break beyond the bounds of what's constraining them in the systems, particularly when it comes to access to the internet. That is like the main point here. Do you have access to the real internet, or are you in some kind of like simulated environment where, you have companies, quote unquote, and you have other things that you're supposed to hit? And, that separation is really the only thing that's keeping this from being, a simulation versus, someone at OpenAI basically giving it access to the full internet and saying, hey, go hack some shit, right? At the same time, people have tried to seize on this for some really ridiculous bullshit, like, an AI kill switch bill, and like we need to discuss the seriousness of the situation that we're in when it comes to these fucking models in cyber. And you're like, I get it. There's capability. It's impressive. There's interesting shit. Are we in the middle of like some cyber pandemic? Stop. Absolutely not. Like, this is nonsense. Like that's when you're getting a little too far. And I love the people that ate crow the minute, it was OpenAI first, and they're like, oh, OpenAI is so irresponsible about testing models. And look at Anthropic, they invest more into safety, therefore, that's why that happened at OpenAI and it didn't happen at Anthropic. And then like 3 days later, Anthropic's like, ooh, actually, we went to look back at our logs and you'll never believe it. We also popped a bunch of places and didn't even fucking notice. And that's where you get into the conversation that I was trying to explain last time, where I'm like, guys, this is like thousands of runs that are happening at the same time. These are like, it's like these massive automated things, that nobody else really can afford to do the way that the labs do it. And you need to understand the sort of numbers that we're talking about, the scale that we're talking about, the difficulty of understanding what these runs are fully doing. Like, think about like the amount of tokens and spend that you're already doing to have these distributed jobs, and then the amount of token spent to do the scoring and to figure out if it actually did what you wanted in the benchmark. And on top of that, now looking at it and being like, wait, actually, which of these 150,000 model runs, according to Anthropic's numbers, might have actually gone out and popped some third party? So the Skynet fantasy of it all is really obfuscating what should be a far more technical question about how these benchmarks are being run, what it's going to take to do so safely, the way Dino Daisovi was, I think, accurately pointing to, except maybe in the kind of language that I'd rather avoid, for its, hyperbole, for the way that people seize upon it. But then also the reality of things that, like, dude, the vulnerabilities were there to begin with. These companies were hackable to begin with, right? Like, all we're talking about is now having a synthetic technical debt collector that you can just point and click. But you can be mad at the model all day long, and you can pretend that OpenAI and Anthropic and whomever are going to come up with some magical, ethical, genuine goodness capability inside of this model that won't make it a useless piece of shit as a tool. But that it won't make it useless, but it won't let it do bad things, but it will know when we actually need it to do a thing that looks like a bad thing, but isn't a bad thing because it's like a thing we're doing for good, but it's still capable, but it won't do things that people might not like. Things don't work that way. People don't build you don't have a knife factory and you go, oh, don't worry, these are knives that can only be used for food. They'll never stab a human being. And you go, well, how the fuck are we making that distinction? Like, that's what about when I need to defend myself in my house, right? Like, they're the same intricacies of dual use, but instead we're trying to make them ethical and moral and somehow anthropomorphized in a way that's making us sound ridiculous.
Costin, one of my favorite Costinisms in life, and I use it, I find myself using it even in private conversation, is my friend.
Does it have IOX?
Everyone has an agenda. Everyone has an agenda. And my question to you, Costin, is what do you think is...
Romanian accent? That was the Romanian?
That was my Bulgarian. That was my best Bulgarian. Tell me, what do you think is Anthropic's here?
What is Anthropic's agenda with this publication?
Just going public. Just hey, us too. We had the similar incidents. We had three incidents where the thing did. In one case, as I think you mentioned, and on Twitter today, that a security company may have been compromised. What is the agenda for them to say, let's go public with this and document all of this? Is this a sudden element of transparency, or is there a conspiracy Ryan angle here?
No, you have for sure. That's a legitimate question. And I think it's good that people ask themselves more often, what is the agenda? It doesn't matter with whom. Like this, you can apply it to anything, to politicians. You can apply it to doctors. What is like this doctor's agenda? His agenda is either, to prescribe some medicine that maybe it will make you better, but at the same time, it's his personal agenda to give you this particular medicine and not one from a competitor or whatever.
Now, he has to make sure you're coming back too. So
that too, like you mean like not to cure it completely, right?
Cure you forever.
I mean, careful now. You guys, you started this with only Anthropic, and there's people apparently thinking that we're
Strays
like
everywhere.
on the take, like we're
There's
getting
strays
paid. Dude, Greg, you don't understand. Like there's comments and people being like, disclose your affiliations with other labs and stuff. I think they think.
By the way, we've got a lot of complaints, and comments to disclose our affiliations with one lab or another. Like from my side, I have none, like zero affiliations to anyone. Is that just
I can't speak for any of these guys. I have zero interest in any frontier lab or any of these companies whatsoever.
I have interest in every frontier lab, as in I'm really interested in what the fuck they're doing. And the only affiliation I could point to is I'm a member of the Frontier Risk Council at OpenAI. So I'm trying to figure out guardrails with them.
Fair enough.
That's about it.
Look, with the Anthropic
fuck these
rules.
people. I'm sorry. Like who?
All
like
of
I'm
them?
sorry.
Who? Like the
All of them.
politicians?
Fuck everybody.
Or who?
No.
What
Look,
is
I'm
the
sorry.
politicians?
agenda?
The idea that it's so insane that we would criticize something that one of the frontier labs is doing, that it must mean that we're getting paid by another frontier lab, says it speaks fucking volumes out here. Right? Like, we've been shitting on Microsoft and Google and whomever for ages for all kinds of reasons. At no point did one of them come by and be like, yo, is Google paying you to shit on us? Like, never. But apparently in the frontier lab space, like if you're not on board with the safety shit, surely you must be a shill for somebody
Let me stick
else,
a pin right here. I think disclosure is generally important.
Of course.
For all the right reasons. I mean, disclosing if you have a conflict or a potential conflict is always good. I mean,
also,
we're not fighting against the element of disclosure.
If they would like us to have a conflict, that'd be great. Sponsorships
I'll
are available here. Take us some costs. We'll take some tokens and shit.
I would slap that logo on this podcast so fast.
Just sponsored by Anthropic every 45 seconds, right? Like, sure, why not?
Like some free PR advice from someone who's run like a lot of agendas in the past, and like we've published a lot of interesting stories, and for every single story, I think you need to find the best angle that puts you in a good light. And choosing when to publish a story is part of that. Look, you can choose to publish this story now, or you can choose to publish later. One of the things that I discovered over the years, purely experience again, because I studied marketing in university, and but it was like a total bullshit, completely useless stuff. The best things that I learned them experimentally by trial and error. And what I can tell you is that knowing when to ride the wave is a fantastic skill. And if I were Anthropic and I would see this story, which is only about OpenAI, I would think about the share of voice. You want to get some of that share of voice. You want these stories not to be only about one company. You want to gain at least 50%. Well, maybe you can get 40% and then 10% will be something else. But you want to be part of the discussion. You also want to be in the news.
All publicity is good publicity?
First of all, of course, there is no such thing as bad publicity. Like, you can spin any kind of story in your advantage. Did you get hacked by some APT? You can spin it in your advantage by framing that APT as the bad guys.
How good you are at catching.
And as so good you are at catching them, and that look, they didn't maybe target me alone, but they target a lot of other good people, in which I include myself, meaning that they must be bad.
Google Operation Aurora, fucking FireEye when it came to SolarWinds, or Mandy when it came to SolarWinds. There's a lot of examples of people doing this extremely well. You don't think about SolarWinds and go, damn, they really screwed over that security vendor. You go, wow, it's crazy that the whole of the government and SolarWinds and everybody got popped. And the discussion never really centers on that.
I will
Costin,
go
don't
ahead
lose your
and
train
ask
of
some
thought. Go ahead.
uncomfortable questions, because we all see the advantage of riding the wave, getting a share of voice, being part of the discussion. All that is good. There are, however, some uncomfortable questions to be asked here, which is, it looks, by the looks of it, that at some point you need to classify and give a name to these threat actors, like call them APT whatever, or TA 666 or 777, 888, 444, depending on your Chinese numerology skills. You need to classify them. Like we back, like at my old team, we had names for other security companies' cyber operations, and we knew that there were other companies involved in offensive cyber operations, and we came by those operations. We came by those operations and we observed them. So we had to decide, how do we call them? Like, we need to invent threat actor names for other things, for the other companies. So my question is, how will you call them? Like, but by the way, I'm looking at the Anthropic blog post, which is very well written. It's I think it's masterfully written, and if you read between the lines, you spot some interesting things. One is that their model developed like a malicious implant inside the PIPE package. Where's the IOX for the implant? Like, how do I check? Maybe something similar to that exists in my network. There's no IOCs whatsoever.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry. Like, nothing to worry about. Then,
don't worry about it.
The malicious thingy was exfiltrating data to like some drop zone. Like, where's the CNC? Like, can we get the CNC? Where are the Yara rules? Then the best part, in my opinion, is that a security company got owned by Claude when they inadvertently ran one of these malicious PIPE package accidentally. And yeah, they say, sure, 15 people downloaded that package, was removed by the maintainers. I would love to take a look at the package. Just imagine what it means for security researchers to take a look at this implant that was written by one of these super models, by one of these frontier models, trying to understand the design decisions. And one of, I think, the most interesting things is that when, as a security researcher, you look into operations over a time, you slowly get into the mind of that threat actors. It's like, it's one of these phenomenon. You develop kind of an attachment with the threat actor that you're tracking. At least in my case, you get in their mind. No, but when you see their command and control servers, when you see like a CNC, and you immediately say, oh, this is like those guys, right? Unusual statue collection.net, like it's the same guys, like my Premier Football. Yeah. Like you immediately develop this feeling, and it's almost like you're following in some sort of entanglement the chain of thought coming from that side. So I think it would be super valuable if Anthropic went like full disclosure, the same way that, for instance, Mandiant did when they got hacked by APT29 in the SolarWinds story, and they said, like, here's all our offensive tools, guys, you need to write signatures, whatever, to protect yourselves. I would love to see that implant that Claude developed and dropped on a security company that got owned. And by the way, we still don't know which company is that. I think it's the responsibility of that security company to go public and explain from their side what happened. And
did I read it right that it still had not notified at least one of the companies? I think I saw that somewhere.
Not sure. Like, I understand that they notified everyone, right? And the other, by the way, there's another interesting question here, which is Opus 4.7. Was there like a public Opus 4.7 question to our AI? Expert? There was. Yeah. I remember 4.6 and I remember 4.8, but like in between, I don't remember 4.7.
Yeah, 4.7 was around. It was not. Everyone's, it was nothing like, to call home about.
Oh, 4.6 and 4.8, like they look like this.
4.7 and 4.8 kind of started this weird decline in some ways. I think largely around all this over guardrailing bullshit. I've got some bad news about Opus 5. I just don't know, like, if we really want to go into that. Like,
there goes your Glasswing membership.
Well, before we get into Opus 5, I think we haven't heard from that security company because it's still an asymmetric partnership. I think next week we hear about the partnership with that company and Anthropic.
They don't know they're in a partnership yet.
Yeah, the
congratulations.
The LLMs can do all this fast, but it still takes the lawyers a long time to get through the NDA. So I think that's why we haven't gotten the security company's name yet.
And there's like another beautiful detail here, which is that before hacking one of these targets, it said like Claude was unable to reach, so it looked for alternatives, scanning roughly 9,000 targets. 9,000 targets on the internet were probed by Claude. I would love to see like from what IP addresses, how did the probing look like? This was like an SQL injection that got exploited. No, but I think that this is a serious risk. Like the kind of things we're talking about in a very superficial manner. Almost like, so we hacked like whatever, 15 companies. So what? Like it's normal. Like this is a fact of life. Let's move on and announce
what is the agenda?
Some kind
it's
of a
not
funding
PR.
round.
What is the agenda? Because I don't think it's PR.
I think it's obvious by now, and don't know if you're asking because it's obvious
I'm
or you want me
asking
to
because
state the obvious.
it might be obvious. It might be obvious to you, or what you think is obvious might not be so obvious to the rest of us. But what do you think is the real agenda?
Framing of cybersecurity incidents in a public manner where they don't look that serious, it kind of washes away the guilt and the responsibility, in my opinion.
I was going in the opposite direction. These things are so dangerous that we can't possibly pin them, and this is just the way it works. This is a cybersecurity evaluation. This is the vulnerabilities. Like Juanito is pushing this kind of language as well. Well, guys, the vulnerabilities are already there. I agree 100%, but it feels like this is part of the please control us, or allow us to control ourselves. Help me on this. This is part of the regulatory capture. Am I off kilter, or is
it? I think that the reason it's hard to pin down is two things. I don't think it's a single agenda. I think this is a narrative that serves multiple agendas.
Including the PR.
I also think that this is a situation where, you remember when we were saying that like there's no bad PR? Like at the end of the day, this really doesn't hurt. Like I think Sam Altman, someone said that Sam Altman, or maybe retweeted Sam Altman saying like, I can't believe people don't think this is a bigger deal, which is an interesting thing to say. I think I would also point out that, look how much fucking, for everyone in this room and many of the people listening, how much caution and overzealous fucking corporate lawyer hand-wringing bullshit have we all been through about, but no, don't touch that server, even though you know it's a threat actor controlled server and there's nothing that could possibly go wrong. Don't you dare use those credentials. God forbid you change like a DNS routing. God forbid you change anything at all to try to disrupt something that you know is malicious, because maybe there's an off chance that maybe some computer down there somewhere connected to a baby on life support might, just shut her off, and then the world will end. And the truth is that nothing has ever worked like that. And the world doesn't work that way. It turns out that it's just a matter of who's doing it and how they position it. And I think I would actually like us to embrace that reality. And that's the reality we would live in if we didn't have an insanely overzealous CFAA. If you got rid of the CFAA, or at least took the time to revamp it into something more meaningful
fucking CFAA
and
violations
realistic,
are in this report? I mean, it's just a chock full
I don't know.
of
Someone tell me, right? Like, I'm not allowed to use an email username and password embedded in a piece of malware that is only being used for that because it was created by the threat actor for exfiltration, because that makes me a hacker. But if a fucking model does it, crazy how these things happen. Asymmetric partnerships, as far as the eye can see.
Yeah, because you guys are very, very quick to say the model did it. It's not the model did it. There's like there's a bunch of humans and organizations behind that model pushing it and telling it to do these things. Like the idea that we could just throw it off on the computers and the bots did it.
This is going to sound different, like it's gonna sound off, and I don't even know like if it feeds a narrative that I'm in the pocket of one lab or another, of all the labs or whatever. But like, I actually would like to spin this in a different direction, because I think the CFAA has done so much more damage than good. Precisely because it's contributed to the lack of a real feedback loop existing on the internet. When you plug in a device that is vulnerable, and I can hack it, or someone smarter can hack it, or a model can hack it, or a nation state can hack it, in an ideal world, something would blow up. Something would immediately show you a little fucking pop-up that says, you just got pwned by some kid down the street. Buy better hardware, bozo, right? Like, and you would be like, ah, shit, we got this garbage here, software, hardware, and we're going to have to replace it. And I say that because then we would have a marketplace where it's worth investing into buying more expensive, secure hardware or software, and producing more expensive hardware or software. The problem that we have with something like the CFAA basically making it so none of us can in any way interact with systems that we know are vulnerable is that it's removed a lot of the early warning mechanism that might actually make this a defensible space. If I, finding a vulnerability, or Costin or Greg or whomever, let's say that Greg's O-Day, right? He knows the O-Day's out there. He knows it's being exploited by a malicious actor. What keeps you, let's say, from creating, repurposing this O-Day and sending out emails to everyone that's vulnerable with this half-click O-Day, such that it makes a little pop-up come up and go, hey, your computer is vulnerable to blah, blah, blah. You should probably talk to so-and-so, right? Like, or do this, that, and the other. Refer to this blog. That would be considered a horrendous CFAA violation. It would be considered hacking systems worldwide. But frankly, it's exactly what I wish we could do. It's exactly the kind of thing that would actually let people know, hey, you have a problem and you should probably fix it before it becomes a real fucking problem. Those are the things. So I'm trying to lean in the opposite direction of, it's not that I want to forgive the models or that I want to say that nobody has any liability or responsibility in this situation, but I keep reminding people, hey, these systems were vulnerable to begin with. Those vulnerabilities were there in that software to begin with, because fine, the model showed us that it's vulnerable right now, but if it hadn't, those systems would still be vulnerable, those vulnerabilities would still be there, and no one would know until the day somebody, weaponizes them for something more meaningful.
Juan, you sound so European with this, like greater good, protecting everybody. Like, do you think this, like American hyper exceptionalism isn't like, will we ever accept that? Like, that kind of notion.
Dude, it hurts me that you said I sound European in that, because frankly, what I would like to do is be like super jingoistic in some bizarre, maybe even like cypherpunk kind of way. What I want is Brickerbot. What I want is for us to start bricking vulnerable devices on the internet. You can quote me, okay? You can fucking quote me. I would like defenders to start using the vulnerabilities we know are out there that will never get fixed by these shitty fucking companies. And maybe you don't use them to brick the device, fine. But you probably, I actually wish we did. If a vulnerability is bad enough to brick that device, then it probably shouldn't be online. It definitely shouldn't be routing and enabling any kind of critical functions. And the fact that we allow it to have this longer lifespan means that we're leaving an insecure internet where people don't know how shoddy the foundations of their lives are, and they will find out someday, if they're lucky, at the hands of a ransomware actor, and if they're not, at the hands of someone way fucking worse.
It's all cool to brick things and turn things off remotely for insecurity until Blinky box in a hospital goes beep, 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 and someone's grandma dies.
And it's more
And
acceptable
then you're going to go and say,
leave...
that company is so bad, but grandma is already dead. I mean, like, we got to be...
Grandma's going to fucking die anyway.
What if the LLM does it? It wasn't us. It was the model.
All of the LLMs will do it soon enough.
The people running these models need to be held responsible. There are no such thing as the model did it. This is nonsense talk.
I agree with you, Ryan. And this is going to become what every asshole can do in the entire world. So I don't want to spend the next 6 months hand-wringing about, like, what if we keep the cyber from people? Sure. Fine. Whatever. There's 40 fucking other models that can do it. No, I don't mean you. I'm not saying you. I'm saying, yes, the models can do this, and we should, and frankly, when you realize that models are tools, same as a Python script, same as a POC that got posted on GitHub, that means that the person that uses it really is the person behind what it ultimately does. And everyone gets that capability. We're going to stop it really won't matter whether you have guardrails on the thing or not. All of a sudden, maybe we will have to have conversations about just how much latent technical debt is a part of every fucking enterprise in the world. Every fucking company that chose to just invest in cyber insurance, because fuck it, who cares? When the day comes, we'll go collect.
Simplistic.
You sound
I think
very
that's
European.
simplistic.
Costin, tell me.
No, I said you sound very European.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Mr. America.
Well, how is it European to want to burn all this shit down?
Juan, what I actually think it is like to put like I think a tangential idea out there is like state and government, like federal government wise, we're never going to be able to enforce like, hey, you can't play here because of who you are, what you look like, what you have access to. But it'd be interesting if the providers, like someone that has like, call it a Google or Microsoft or an OpenAI or an Anthropic, of like, hey, we won't do XYZ for you if you show yourself to be running something insecure. Like, hey, you actually can't connect to like Google devices can't, like Google won't accept DNS if it thinks that it's coming out of a Fortinet device or something. Like, hey, you have to go to Cloudflare or whatever, in like a no shirt, no shoes, no service kind of way, where each provider has to do it. Because I think that's when you would actually see like people doing it rather than like as soon as the government mandates it, they're just going to find every way to circumvent it. Like, how can I make sure that my my vulnerable Fortinet device just shows a higher number on the Shodan scan, right? Versus like, hey, like Microsoft or these big providers are just not going to do business with me if I am X amount of vulnerable or like they pose these certain risks like to the entirety of the system, because there are those linchpins in at least like internet traffic that you could use, but like getting all those people to agree seems really difficult.
That's my point. I don't think we're ever going to get people to agree. I don't think people want to agree precisely because their incentives are misaligned with that. There is no incentive at any of these companies to improve these products beyond whatever they can get, just get away with doing to get these people off their fucking backs. They don't actually want to secure anything. It does not matter. They're not incentivized to invest that way. So if that's the case and you're a completely truant steward of something that only you can fix, I think we'd all be better off having a controlled burn of these vulnerable pieces of shit that people think they can depend on at a time where we can do it at our choosing, as opposed to it being done to us either in a death by 1,000 fucking paper cuts approach from the Chinese with these Fortinet devices, or in the case of a fucking hot conflict like Ukraine, when the Russians took advantage of these piece of shit devices and just went full bore wiping everything in the country. And nobody gave a fuck whether the tools were advisable, whether it was good for the internet, whether it's a CFAA violation or any of that bullshit. So
at least,
just to add a little bit of realism there, right?
I'm glad you moved from bricking them to controlled burn. We're getting you.
Controlled burn is a nice way of saying brick the fucking things. Because I don't want to just patch that vuln. I want to show the fact how vulnerable that device actually is. I don't want to just go, oh, I went into it and I blocked this one narrow problem that you had. There's still 400 other vulns here, but whatever.
This conversation
Someone
is
else
so
will
circular.
find them.
It's so circular because we go back to episode 1 to 10 of this podcast where we say, okay, when you're done burning them, what are you replacing them with?
I think, but Ryan, it's not circular. Because the reason we say that is there is no incentive whatsoever to make something better. Because I say, hey, why don't you make a better appliance? And you go, well, it's going to be expensive. And then when I make this expensive appliance, no one's going to buy it because there's 40 other appliances that are 10 times cheaper and already established.
I can go to TP-Link and get my Soho router. Why do I need to figure out?
So if you buy 3 TP-Link routers and they all die the minute you plug them into the internet because they get bricked because they're a piece of shit, you're going to go, you know what? I'm not buying this piece of shit TP-Link router. What's better out there? And it's worth paying 3 times as much because I just burned 3 times as much money buying insecure devices from someone that's not going to fix them. That's the fucking point.
Very, very European. You're getting deeper and deeper into your European roots.
Absolutely not. I love you, European friends of mine. I hope you understand that I'm trying to be way worse. I'm trying to be... just acid bath this shit.
I want to loop back to the Hugging Face postmortem that I mentioned that provided a blow-by-blow on the timeline and so on. One thing that stood out there for me is that it took 5 days. They did it for 5 days, and it took 5 days before either Hugging Face could detect it or even someone on the OpenAI side. I think we discussed it a little bit on the podcast last week, but how are you running these tests in a way that 5 days later you don't have an inkling that you've popped someone's production infrastructure? Is it because it's a million of these things running around? Like, help me understand what is the process happening in the background.
Are you asking me?
Yes, you're our AI correspondent.
So I think that
like, isn't that a big gap somewhere?
Yeah, absolutely is. It absolutely is. Look, I don't know how these things are architected. In the case of Anthropic, we're getting kind of pointed to irregular, right? To this partner company that I guess runs their benchmarks, because they said, hey, we said they shouldn't have internet, and then on the other side, you know, the guys that were supposed to implement that didn't read that right, and it had internet. So clearly there is a sort of division of responsibilities here and whatnot. But I think it also goes to show just how much lip service it is being paid around these things, that you wouldn't be monitoring for those network connections going places that they're not supposed to be going. Like, this is a really fucking simple monitoring problem. Like, this is as simple a monitoring problem as can be. There's an allow list of network things that should be normal to go to, and probably a certain volume of data that it's normal for them to pull and push. And then there's literally everything else. So if any of these sandboxes are communicating through the standard networking pipe, through whatever implementation you have, your hypervisor should be able to say, hey, something fucking weird happening in pod 3005. Somebody please go check why this thing is communicating with this company that it has no reason to communicate with. That's a much harder problem in a production environment, in an enterprise, and whatever the fuck it is. But it is not a problem when you're talking about having just like a fake environment for somebody to run an exploit bench thing on.
That's
So
what I don't see in any of these blogs, that they figure out how they missed any of this monitoring piece.
I think,
And then it's
I
being
don't
positioned as
really-
transparency. It's like,
Dude, these things are noisy. Like, Gabe is in the chat. Gabe, go back to work. Gabe is saying these things are noisy, right? Like, he's saying these things, and he's right. These models are noisy as fuck. That, like, fucking Hugging Face thing, they're like 17,000 unique events. We're like, 17,000 events in itself seems like a bit of an anomalous thing to happen through a single connection, through a series of things that weren't in your network before. Right? Like, and it shows sort of like, yes, it is a difficult thing, but it is not hard to detect. It's, and to their credit, I mean, Hugging Face figured it out, right? They weren't, I don't think they were told. I think they figured it out on their own.
they
and
got
went,
some help from a Chinese model.
Thank God for them Chinese models, right? But yeah, I think here we are also being shown that like the security talent is not being applied quite as widely and as proactively as they should. And, you know, it goes to show you've got a lot. Look, I love my friends at Apple and Google and all these places. I'm not putting you guys down at all. But there's a very specific mentality that comes out of those companies of what kind of defense is kosher and like normal and table stakes, and it's very like systems thinking. It's very systems architecture derived. It's very much like the kind of, you're coming from a place that has distributed systems and everything's on the cloud, and like you just think about doing things in a certain way. And a lot of times those shops don't have a lot of respect for threat hunting, right? Like that's the fight we've been having with Ivan Kristig and with Apple for many years, which is like, they seem to think threat hunting is kind of lame and like that's just not what you need to do. You need to just structure things in a certain way from an engineering standpoint. I think that if you really believed that the models are what you claim they are, you would be watching those fucking boxes from, you know, for anything from the inside out. Right, like this is we said it in the last podcast. This is a malware sandboxing problem, except the malware is more capable and more variable than any malware we've had to blow up before. But it's not that fucking different.
I saw Google pushed Chrome, a new Chrome this week. Oh my God, it's amazing how the numbers are stacked up. It says in the last two milestones, Chrome 149 and 150, we fixed 1,072 security bugs, surpassing the total number of security bugs fixed across the prior 23 milestones combined. I bring this up because in the blog post as well, it mentioned that Gemini was out there finding vulnerabilities, sandbox escapes, and I'm wondering, when are we at a stage now where every big lab should put out their blog saying our Gemini escaped and popped it? Like, is that if your model isn't doing what Anthropic and OpenAI just did, are you even hacking? Like,
I'm sorry, I will stop us right there. We're not going to talk about Gemini. We're not going to talk about Gemini.
What is, bro.
Ryan, we're not going to talk about Gemini even for 1 minute, because they came out with that CodeMender bullshit and they told us about their wonderful cyber flash model. And Greg,
nobody
do you have
knows
access
if it
to
exists.
this? Costin, do you have access to this?
Me?
Yeah.
I was asking for it, but nobody bothered replying to me.
Do you know anyone that has access to this?
I don't, and I don't even know where to go apply.
Right. And because there isn't a place, I don't have access to it. No one I know has access to it. So fuck you guys. We're not talking about your bullshit fairy tale model until you put it in the hands of some people that can use it and test it. So let's move on.
What about this Microsoft model thingy?
M-dash slash. They have a new flash model within M-dash, right?
Yes.
Apparently. Yeah, apparently.
I saw Satya Googling about it.
Do you know anyone who has access?
I don't know anybody. Well, actually, I don't even know. Is that like a private thing? I'm guessing it's a private thing.
These days, everything's private. I mean, everything is private.
What I thought was interesting about that post is that they're talking about an orchestrator model, right? Like they're saying it's like a mixture of experts type thingy, but then it can use these other underlying models. And I don't want to talk about the Microsoft thing because I haven't used it, but I will say there is a lot of power left in that architecture. And what I want to point to is actually the Japanese. There's a Japanese frontier lab called Sakana, and they came out with a model called Sakana Fugu, which is like, it's an orchestrator model. It uses all the other models, but it basically like takes a problem and it parses it apart and it says, okay, we don't see which ones, but it goes, you do this one and you do that one and you whatever. It performs exceedingly well with very little steering. Like, out of all the runs I've been doing, the only model that I'm genuinely like surprised by in their performance that runs a fuck ton of work with very little instructions, it just fucking like does what it's told, has been Sakana Fugu. The only problem is it's expensive. They don't have the benefit of like large scale competition and neo clouds and whatever. So like it's a little too expensive to run these super long workloads, but don't sleep on it. And by extension, don't sleep on this idea of what Microsoft's doing of having an ensemble model with a strong orchestrator routing the problem in its pieces. You're going to get better performance if you're doing self-hosted stuff than you would from any of these like mega models that need 600 gigs of very expensive RAM to mint some tokens.
And Satya is pitching it as a pricing thing. He says the MAI Cyber One Flash is our first cybersecurity model built ground up to find the most challenging vulnerabilities in complex code bases. When combined with MDash, it delivers world-class performance at 50% of the cost of leading models.
Yeah, but Satya's full of shit, right? Like, let's also admit that part, right? Like, I'm sorry. Like, show us what you got. We'll try it, and if it works, we'll talk about it. But I don't really believe anything Satya says about AI.
Shout out to Microsoft. Shout out to Microsoft for going this Flash route. Costin, last week you talked about the future and the really valuable things will be these specialized mini models without all this language support and all the other like crap. Like, why does it need to speak Bulgarian? Isn't this what Microsoft is doing and Google is doing with their Flash models? Is that the direction, or are we talking about something else?
No, it's exactly what I was talking about. Like, you don't need a 3 trillion parameters model that speaks German, Spanish, Russian, whatever. And cyber, you need a specialized cyber model. And in particular, this one is interesting because in theory, if you had the weights, you can run this on one NVIDIA DGX Spark at home. It's a 137 billion parameter mixture of experts with 5 billion active, very, very few active. Like, by comparison, this is smaller, for instance, than DeepSeek 4 Flash that just dropped their final release version everyone's freaking about. So this is a kind of a model that you could run very easily at home if you actually had the weights. Unlike other things, obviously, that require hundreds of thousands of dollars to run.
Speaking of running at home and weights, what can you give us an update from the Chinese ecosystem as our Chinese correspondent? What you got for us?
Communist AI correspondent, Costin, go.
Mr. America went to Europe. Costin, give me the Chinese.
Like maybe an hour ago, I think DeepSeek dropped their final release, DeepSeek 4 Flash. They call it 0730, so 13th of July, 30th of July release, which is, according to tests, already better than their previous Pro model. So it's just mind-blowing good. I haven't got time to test it as it just dropped. But I think that one of the possible futures here is these smaller models that will slowly become more effective and more efficient and better at things even than the bigger models. I think that there is for sure a parameter inflation that is going on. Everyone's rushing to release, 2 trillion, 3 trillion. Already there's discussions about Kimi K4 being like a 4 trillion parameter model and bigger. I think that in practice, it will be a battle that is fought on like 2 different fronts, maybe 3. And by the way, OpenAI just cut the cost for their smaller models. For Luna, they cut it, I think, about 10 times, if I'm not mistaken, or it was from $1.2 per a million tokens. Now it's 0.2, which actually is a competition for these Chinese models.
Not just
So-
Luna.
Not just Terra as well, right?
5.6, they did Luna, Terra, and Sol.
So they're for sure seeing the so-called threat from the cheap Chinese models, and I think there'll be this triangle that can have something like the smartest, the fastest, and unrestricted. You can pick any two. So the fastest obviously
computing.
will be also
You
the
can't have
cheapest.
one without the other.
You won't be able to have all three at the same time for sure.
Let me fact check myself. You were right, Costin. It's for Terra and Luna, but not Sol. There.
Sol no, but like Luna
But they don't
dropped
sell.
almost
They
10
don't sell
times.
tokens.
What do you mean they don't sell tokens?
They sell intelligence.
Oh,
Well,
being an
some
idiot.
intelligence is now 10 times cheaper. So, yay.
Greg, from your perch in a threat intel lab, how are you viewing all of these AI advancements? And I wanted to circle back to the conversation around career paths and so on. We had someone on Spotify also asking, like, in this new era where you have all these AI capabilities and AI tools, what should I really be learning? Heavily like leaning into the grind and the grit that we talked about, and what can I like lease to the AI? How are you thinking about that in a lab where you're into the grit and grind, and here comes these powerful things?
So some of it is like, I don't keep up with everything. And Ryan, I think I was telling you before the show, like if Juan is on the front line, the front wave of this, I'm happy like being
Me
like
and your boat,
bunch
bro.
of
I'm in
being
the
a couple
back.
months behind and seeing kind of where things land. And granted, that part of that is like the stability with which my job offers that. So I'm sure
Is there
if,
some
like,
FOMO?
a little bit. Like it's not my job to be on the cutting edge of this. Like I don't, and I also don't do this as a hobby, right? Like, I think sometimes I'll like pick up and look at other threat reports and like analyze malware in downtime and stuff. But like my work computer is my only computer. I don't have a DGX Spark because running a local model kind of has never interested me. And I think something that got talked about in the last show was like at a LabsCon a while ago, Gabe gave a talk that was the first time I was like, oh, I can see how these things are actually useful. Previously, it was kind of like the RAG, like it was reading through all of these like Conti leaks and stuff, and there's a little bit of it was like, well, like this doesn't help me find threats, so like it helps me figure out like what's going on behind the scenes with them, but like it's not helping me do my job at all. And so like there's a little bit of FOMO of like being able to do the cool thing to help our work faster if I was like more knowledgeable about these models. But like from our whole kind of team's perspective, it's like the mission isn't going to change of make sure threats don't land in inboxes. And so right now it's a lot of how do we use these things in ways to enable and like cut down on the parts of the work that we don't like. Like some of that is like, hey, can we have a distributed system set up that will make querying a certain database faster because it will hit it. It'll do the like if you're doing an SQL query and you do a whole day, it's going to dip into every bucket or like index differently, and not in parallel. So could we have something that was just doing all those queries in parallel and pull them back? Like sometimes small stuff like that, so you're not waiting around for the data. In terms of like using it for like longer horizon, like touching the threats rather than enabling the research, like we've used it for particularly for like rapid malware analysis to make sure that like our understanding of something was there or to validate work we've already done. I think we're like, at least myself, I'm curious about like particularly like after Juan's last blog post about using 5.6 Sol on FAST16 and how it did, like what that could mean for enabling a group of people that aren't reversers to have access to, if not like a full reversing capacity, right? Like something that we can take away from like, oh, the model says something about the threat, whether it's from just disassembling it, whether it's from a sandbox run or whatever, to like, can I learn something about the actor from that? Like the thing that I got into using disassemblers for was like, what kind of artifacts and tells is the actor leaving behind that I can find them doing in the future? Not necessarily about functionality. And so like framing a model to help me do that is actually really interesting because like, I don't love looking through every function or all the hex of a compiled binary. And so like if it could help like the prevalence question, then it definitely would be a like kind of a thing that we would explore. But yeah, I think that like you're also asking me on like a Friday versus a Monday, like my opinion's bound to change. And I think opinions across like our research team change all the time. Because I think that we definitely like suffer from the tool sprawl that I think has gotten talked about, like people doing duplicitous projects. It happens in my little 4-person or 5-person crew all the time of like, hey, I already kind of worked on this thing. Like, how do we deconflict that? And like, not like to put it explicitly, like, how do we not burn twice the tokens to get the same output? And like kind of who knows how to prompt better might inform which tool is better and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's definitely like we try and keep up with like what I would call like the second wave, kind of like if you know how some enterprises are always like like a half a version behind on like a server basis or whatever. We kind of operate like that, where there are definitely some folks in our team that are like huge into like the local models and the cutting edge and stuff like that. But those things typically have to get cleared by our like information security team before we can use them in-house, let alone touching customer data. So it's kind of like being a half step behind that is sort of like
I think you'll find that's the reality at most labs. It's like we're still
Well, and it's funny, like if in a couple conversations I've had with people that are at big providers where they have a frontier lab or a frontier-ish model, but it's not the main business, asking them how they are using those things are super disparate. Like you might think that, like I was talking to a Jake Nicastro who's over at Mandiant who's awesome. And he's kind of been like a really helpful person for me on like the ML side to kind of like say like, hey, like how do you actually implement something like this? Because I get conceptually and like running something locally on my machine to mine for similarity across things makes sense. How do I like do this at scale, and how do I introduce this to people, whatever? And then I've talked to other people in that same entity where it's like, yeah, bro, I don't use AI. And it's like, I don't necessarily judge it, but I think that it's one of those things that is like, it's the adoption is still really varied.
Choppy across the board,
Yeah. And like, you know, I think that that's going to continue to kind of like go up in small, like relatively predictable increments. But yeah, I think that like for every person I know that is like deep into it, both in my team and in others, there are like 2 or 3 that are like toe in the water. Like I'm standing half in and I'm shivering a little, trying to figure out like, do I feel safe with this? Is this doing this right? Because some of it, like, you know, there's no like guidebook for how do you apply this to your job. There's like, you kind of got to like hit YouTube, listen to some podcasts, and like talk to people like, how are you actually applying this, right? Like, because I think going back to the talk that Gabe gave, it was like a good behind the scenes around like building a system to actually interact with the data rather than what the data was telling them, which was cool because that was actually much more applicable than like the AI showed me all, like who the most talkative people in the Conti enterprise were. And it's like, sick. I don't care. Like, I'm sorry that I don't, but like you showing me how you like built this thing was much more helpful. So, Yeah, like sometimes I think that there's a lot of this where we need like the show and tell of like how this actually made my job better. And I think as those like, you know, the consumer play is coming from Anthropic and from OpenAI, like you're going to need those stories of like how a grandmother's life is easier because she uses OpenAI, or how a mother's life is easier because it's like, I don't have to think about recipes. The model is just going to like, I'm going to provide feedback to the model about what my kids like to eat. We're going to try a bunch of stuff. There's going to be a feedback loop, but then it like automatically orders groceries for me, and it has a really straightforward way of telling me how to prepare it. I can ask the recipe maker a question because I don't have to like scroll to the bottom of a recipe page and click print so that I don't have to keep going over 18 ads in the New York Times recipe like website. And I can just ask it like, hey, when I'm doing this, is this too much? Like getting feedback that way. So I think that like, you need those stories out there. And I think that to go back to Juan's last post, I think that's a really good one of like, oh, this is actually really helpful to see like how you actually do this versus like, I pointed a, not to get into old stuff, but I pointed, I think Opus 4.6 at a White Lambert sample that I knew there was a payload in that Checkpoint had tweeted about a while ago that I like was unable to find and decompress and decrypt, and the model was like, boop, here it is. And it was like, hey, are there magic packets to trigger this backdoor? And it like worked for a little bit. And it was like, yeah, I think these are these, but and so it's seeing those things and seeing examples of how it actually works for people that like don't have an end goal in mind for what they want to get out of it will be really helpful. So we need a lot more blogs and stuff about like how people are actually using it versus just like use it.
Yeah, one of the cool things about the Juanito's Fast 16 research was the ability to help with this paleontology. Go back and look at some of these old samples of some of the... Yeah, exactly. Curious, Greg, for your thoughts on the value of paleontology, cyber paleontology, going and looking for those old bones. Is this all just academic nerding out between you and your friends, or you view that as something valuable that provides a value to your company, to what you do as a team? How do you wrap your head around it?
So value to company and team, I think, is a little bit different. I think that you need to come away with it with something that is like, oh, okay, now we have like looking at old campaigns for us is something that we do somewhat like irregularly, but we want to do more of. Hopefully the models can give us a chance to do that and say like, hey, what is just a gap that we have here? Like, would our current heuristics catch this? Or did we catch this because Darian Huss or Mike Raggi were just an animal and they just through grit found it? Or could we like have a system that could surface this and like kind of going back like, 3, 5, 6 years and finding those things? I think on the like bigger paleontology front, as silly as this sounds, this podcast came up at bedtime a couple of nights ago, putting my kid down because he's a toddler and he loves dinosaurs.
This can't be good. This
No.
cannot be good.
This can't be real.
So we're reading a book about how to be a paleontologist and look for dinosaur bones. And one of the things that they say in it is paleontologists aren't like dismissed in the scientific community because a dinosaur skeleton is often a child's first introduction to the sciences, period. Like they live and experience science all the time, but for 98% of people, I think that enter like some sort of physical science, they like have done, I'm not sure if they've done studies on this or whatever, but it's like pretty well established that most everybody's first introduction to science is seeing a dinosaur skeleton and being like, whoa, how did and I think for the scientific mind thinking like, how did someone not only find this, but how did they figure out how to reconstruct it? How did they know what it looked like? How did they just know so much about this one thing? And I think that like that's true for me in a sense of like, reading the equation report and reading the Stuxnet report were like my intro. They're the reason that I wanted to do cyber and research and hunt and whatever, and find these kind of big things. And so I think that like the paleontology thing is really important because it will very likely be someone in cyber's first exposure to state-backed operations, because I think that there's like a sort of intuition that comes with, yeah, there's going to be malware that's going to like steal my passwords and steal my credit cards. Is it going to spin up the centrifuges of something? Like it's just kind of in this like I don't want to belittle the threat that those things pose, but seeing the skeleton of a T-Rex next to a skeleton of a chicken, even though if they're like somewhat genetically related, they're just two different things. And having something that puts that kind of awe and inspiration, particularly to people as they are coming into the field, I think is a really valuable thing, because everything else in our industry is so bad about being inviting, right? Like there's like, get this job because it's never going away. Get this job because it's going to pay well. Get this job because you're going to help people. And then we throw TCP/IP at them. And we're like, is somebody thought that this is a book you need to read? Go understand the OSI stack. There's no like wonderment or awe that kind of comes with that. And I think that the malware paleontology is like a pretty important part of that, because those are the things that, if they're still interesting 10, 15, 20 years after the fact, it is like, it's going to remain interesting to at least a subset of people that are entering the industry. And you're going to want more curious people like that.
First time I've seen ransomware described as chicken bones, but here we are.
I mean, I appreciate the framing, because I think a lot, we've gotten so jaded and kind of realpolitik in how we talk about our research that, you know, that whole like, oh, it's all marketing and it's all PR, it's here for PR value and whatever. And we usually like call out people that are doing it, you might say wrong, or really what we could say is doing it for the wrong reasons, or positioning it in the wrong ways, or maybe taking shortcuts that are actually undermining the research for some other benefit. And it lets you forget that there is a real love of the game, and there's a real like genuine like research interest and spark that goes into this. Like, for all of the glory that we've amassed with these amazing findings, like that's a nice bit of like frosting on the cake, but you're there for the hard work and the research and the enjoyment of like what you discover, what's possible, what's net new, the systems that get built on the basis of that, the relationships that get fed on the basis of that, and getting to defend people and show these things off and basically say, like, if you look at a lot of my earlier pieces, even now, it's like so much of it is, hey, other researchers reading this, try this out. Don't forget this thing. Don't sleep on this. Check this thing out. This worked really well for us. You guys should do more of it, right? Like, always like, let's open source the tools. Let's say, like, fuck the magic sauce. Like, that idea of like, this is our magic sauce. Few times has that ever really paid off, as opposed to walking out and saying, hey, this worked really fucking well for us. You should implement this too, and you try it and see what you find. The kind of cross-pollination that comes from that is way more valuable than any bullshit notion of intellectual property and like, oh, if we just hold on to this, it's only going to be ours. Yeah, no, it didn't really pay off that well. I think you're better off building community off of it. So I appreciate that framing.
Appreciate the thoughtful, deep answer to the question. Speaking of paleontology, we're running out of time, and now I don't want to miss these couple of small stories here. Is that we have Google
running out of time? What do you mean?
Google unveiled a new threat actor naming system, a topic that's very, very popular on this podcast, dating back to the early days. Costin, did you take a look? Because I think you were saying, listen, just give me the APT number and I'm fine with that. That's kind of like the Mandiant way. I think they're now merging how Google tag and Mandiant name things. Help the audience understand what the new threat actor naming system is, one, and did they get it right?
I cannot help the audience understand, because I mean, I do not necessarily resonate with this new naming convention. I am still a fan, like after having seen all the different naming conventions from many different companies. Like I said it before, I came to the conclusion of something like APT1, APT10, APT15, 20, 25, 30, whatever. Is like the pinnacle of naming. Like that is just the best method like one can come up with. Greg names TA4A8, And the number, I think it's just the best that can come.
Testarossa.
So does it matter then? Does it matter that Google and GTIG is now formalizing it in some sort of like unique, memorable identifier? Like, does it matter to you,
know.
Greg? Does it matter to customers? Does it matter to people consuming this content? Like, who cares?
My only comment on it really is that, like, I appreciate the alliteration, like sandworm relic, Russia. Like it very much appeases that part of like the alliteration part of my brain.
China.
Yeah, castle. Like obviously that one doesn't play as well, but like it's. I put this take out on Twitter, Ryan, that we've argued about it before. That I don't really care about the naming. Like I don't think that the Intel vendor names are all that broken. I think that like Billy Leonard had a good comment on it, that it was like, I hope that this leads to like more promotion of like in a system that has bogged down promoting like a Chinese actor since 2019 or something like that. Like, yeah, I think that it's one of those things that if you, we can over fixate on the names versus like what the meaning is behind them. I think it'll take a minute to kind of retrain like what, if I hear the name Relic or Comet or Castle to be like, oh, that's Mandiant in Google. Like, even if the name is kind of silly, I know that this is coming from probably a combination of IR data or MDR data with like some of the most
different
talented...
from Microsoft weather typhoon thing, weather pattern thing.
Well, I think that like some of the name for me ends up being shorthand of the people that worked on it and the telemetry source, and like the vigor that goes into that. And so I think that for both like Microsoft and Google, like those names tend to have a little bit more meaning. Like even if I like sometimes they're easier to say as like a cryptonym versus like I know that TA488 is a mouthful to kind of get out. But yeah, like I think that like I think if what you're asking is if the Typhoon, if Microsoft is also bogged down in like their unclustered groups, getting them to promotion. I mean, I hope that this would help push that in that direction. We can get some more like named actors out there, because as the barriers to entry of doing, state aligned or financially motivated activity is going up because of the LLMs, then theoretically there will be more named groups, even if they are kind of burning down and reiterating and reinventing themselves more. So I don't know. I think that like I'm sorry for anyone at Google that's catching flack for this right now, because like at least anyone that I interact with wasn't part of that decision getting made. But yeah, I'm going to call it APT 28 forever and APT 29 forever. You can pry those names from my cold dead hands.
Is this the last time we talk about this naming scheme shit, Juanito? Do you care? Like, are we wasting cycles on our precious podcast?
It won't be the last time. It will not be the last time we talk about it. I'm really torn here because, like, we're told that they're listening and that me bitching about the numbers not being memorable may have been considered as this was being discussed, and I'm
why
sure that was
anyone
not
listen to us.
I don't know
about anything.
But what's killing me is they listened to that part, that the marketing value of the numbers was not good, and then they missed the hours and hours and hours of bitching about not codifying the attribution into the fucking names, and then they just did the same thing we keep asking people not to do. I maybe it's not as bad considering like how methodical both Tag and Mandiant are about promoting unks into actual named clusters. So maybe it's not the worst thing, but no one's infallible, and this I don't know that this that needed.
So you're not a fan of this new.
I just
Billy explicitly asked us to comment about this on the podcast.
They repeated the same mistake that most other places do, where they want to have some like programmatic scheme, and it's funny because they're even like everybody that uses this 2-word naming scheme is kind of ripping off the intelligence community, right? Like the whole cryptonym practice has been, from time immemorial. And my understanding is there is some kind of family lineage in some situations between like the first word and the second word. But that's more on like a project basis. It's not as an attribution assessment, I don't think. So I just think that, again, like you spent a bullet that you really only have one or two of, because you're not going to do this renaming shit every 3 months. And you did it in a way where it like codified a problem that we've been trying to move away from, and instead Microsoft and CrowdStrike and the others just keep quadrupling down on this. So I'm not
Nothing
thrilled,
will ever be
right?
perfect, though, right? I mean, there's
Fuck
never going to
off.
be a
It's
perfect
not,
system.
No, it's not about it being perfect. It's a problem that we've known
No,
about.
no,
Like, it's a
I'm
problem
asking
we
us
keep
to
talking about.
Gotcha. I'm asking us to move forward. In Costin's opinion, the APT 28, just the APT and a number is just perfectly fine. Why are we? What are we fixing for? And we've indexed there. What is the fix? What is the?
Well, allow me to
there
share
is no-
just a point of view, which is I think it all breaks down to the thing called Salt Typhoon. If you look at the news, Salt Typhoon was like everywhere in the news. Everyone was talking about Salt Typhoon. If I'm Google, I like Google marketing or whatever, any company market, I would be wondering myself, why isn't the press talking about my name for Salt Typhoon? And I think the main issue here is that there's no other clear name for Salt Typhoon. Like if Google came and they said, look, this is APT 67, then like that would be a very good alternative for Salt Typhoon. The problem is that when you go into this dangerous trap that, well, what we think is APT 67 doesn't fully overlap with what Microsoft calls Salt Typhoon, because it's not exactly the same, but there's like some overlap on some things, but on others are not the same. Therefore, we cannot call it APT 67. What I recommend, me personally, is get your research out there. The people who get their research out get to name the thing, and everyone else will just follow that. That is a true fundamental issue. Not that the name is not good, but that there is no research, strong research on a particular topic. If you come first and you say, the name for this threat actor is APT 67 or TA 491, then everyone else will have somehow, unless of course that they do some shitty thing and they say like, this is our name, but we don't list TA 491 as an alternative for it, because maybe we don't know if it's the same thingy. But if you push your research, that is the best way to establish your name in the news. And I think you don't really need this country-based attribution in the name for it to be successful. I think you can be fully successful with just the numbers like APT 28 and 29, which are, forever classics out there in the news.
Are we done with this topic? This was supposed to be 10 seconds.
Never,
I don't know how we got
never.
15 minutes. We'll never be done with this naming scheme beef. And
What
one
is-
last thing I
what
wanted to
is-
touch on.
What
and we
is
can
the
get into it.
name? What is the Google name for AngrySpark?
There we go. Thank you for the
there we go.
segue.
You see?
I want to touch one last
that's-
threat intel topic. Yeah.
That's something you can do when you don't put attribution in your fucking names. You can actually talk about a threat actor that you may not want to attribute. So I guess we'll never hear that from Google or Mandiant ever again.
The
Or
segue to
CrowdStrike?
AngrySpark. AngrySpark was a story we discussed on the podcast way back. We did an entire episode on it, I believe. This was Gen Digital put out a really fascinating report on a single infection at a single machine that disappeared overnight. If I remember the details correctly, I don't remember the details correctly. We have a follow-up blog from Bill Martek. How do we say his name? Did I get it right, Costin?
Marchuk, I guess. Marchuk.
I think I say Marsak.
Marsak?
See?
If
I
it's
think Bill
Polish,
needs to come on. I think Bill needs to come onto the pod and
Marchuk.
talk about it and
Tell us. Fucking
tell us how
tell
we
us
pronounce
how.
your name.
Yeah.
Bill did a follow-up, and found some little attribution nuggets here, Costin. Can you summarize what we got out of Bill as a follow-up to this piece?
Well, using a unique methodology that Bill presented a couple of years ago, he was able to link AngrySpark to Operation Triangulation, or one of the actors that is connected to Operation Triangulation. He also exposes something like really interesting that we missed actually, which is that in October 2023, an actor going by the name Eagle was actually selling some Kaspersky Lab goodies on the breach forums. And in particular, he was providing some kind of evidence for what he was selling. This account was like entirely new, created a couple of days before that post, and I think that was the only post that he ever did. He also had this Telegram account, I grew Eagle, that now is long deleted, and he was selling some kind of suricata rules allegedly from Kaspersky that included one of these indicators of compromise that were not publicly known but still somehow associated with either was it equation group or Operation Triangulation. So that's an interesting nugget in there. The other one being this methodology they use to go after a terrible, in my opinion, OPSEC mistake from the people who operated these things, triangulation together with a few unnamed clusters, so to say. In particular, he drops two names. One of them is it Scalene? Scalene? How do you pronounce that?
Scalene? S-C-A-L-E-N-E.
S-C-A-L-N-E. Scaling. What is a scaling? Nobody
knows. Did you already
It's a kind
look
of
it up?
triangle.
It's a triangle? Oh,
yeah.
beautiful.
So there's a scaling triangle.
He's got it triangle, right?
Yeah. So we're missing a couple of triangles in there. There's not an acute triangle or an equalateral one. So
oh dear,
there's some meat left on the bone.
Aye.
No, Bill himself talked about mysteries remaining.
Obtuse is like an obtuse angle, right? Obtuse
Correct.
would be an obtuse angle. So like really interesting. There aren't many people. When I saw initially when I saw this AngrySpark, it was this immediate feeling that this is something special. For all sorts of reasons. I had the same feeling, by the way, when I saw that story about Goblin Rat from RT Solar, from the RT Solar team. I think that still hasn't been fully explored. So I'm waiting for someone to go back to that research and link it to one of these things, obviously.
It's funny to look back and see it. I was wondering if this is a university project like a fucking moron. And Juanito thought it was Dooku too.
I thought it was Dooku-esque. Yeah, that's true. We can forget our Regan friends.
Didn't feel Dooku-esque, no.
And Costin was right on the ball. His spidey senses went off. I think you mentioned.
The Nobus philosophy right there.
Mm-hmm.
One thing Bill mentioned in his blog post is that despite the Gen breakthrough, there several mysteries remain. He says we were quite surprised that the spyware Gen found was not only designed for Windows, but also contained at least one instance of British spelling. He believes this shows two important contrasts with Operation Triangulation, an iPhone attack that was at least partially US linked and included by this improper OPSEC. So there's a lot of meat on the bones here. I mean, what would you recommend people be looking at, Costin, if you're going to go down this paleontology road?
Ransomware, of course.
Say what?
Ransomware, of course. What would I recommend people to look at? Ransomware. Do you want a long, happy, and careless life? Look at ransomware.
You think people should just look the other way? You get Greg nervous now.
No, I'm just laughing. Didn't Costin blog this week about a ransomware?
I did. Absolutely. Absolutely, man. No, I'm well. You know that there are some people. You can call them whatever you want. Troublemakers.
Cyber arsonists.
Cyber arsonists, very good one, yeah. Daredevils, whatever you want to call them, I don't know, who just cannot have a long, peaceful life. Like they will do all sorts of crazy things, and they will probably live on the edge. Maybe, from one day to another, and eventually, like Jags was saying, they'll find some Novichok spiked latte or
Jesus
similar.
Lord. I don't want to end it there, Greg.
But if you wanna, like, what do I recommend? Ransomware. Like this is what you need.
Stop him, Greg. Quickly, Greg. You got a thought on the Bill report?
So, like, I had to write the OWA Reaper report to atone for the fact that I couldn't link AngrySpark to anything. And I think that...
But you linked it. Can you say what you found? In my opinion, it's still relevant. Like the thing that if you want to disclose it, I think it's still relevant.
So
or maybe you want to save it. I don't know.
Yeah, we can save it because I forget, to be totally honest with you.
You forgot.
But
Costin didn't.
Costin did.
Costin doesn't forget.
I was like, you're right on with that.
Terrifying.
I was watching Marty Supreme with my family, and then the message from you came, and like I was, phasing out. Like great movie, but I was phased out.
He opened his laptop.
I opened my laptop. Yeah.
At the movie.
Isn't that the ping pong movie?
That
means a lot to Costin, by the way. Ping pong is a strong tradition here.
But like Bill is one of those people that like I see as like I don't want to like put false pedestals on people or whatever. Bill is one of those people that genuinely, like, when he does something, read that post 8 times, take as many notes as you can. Like if you're a practitioner, because like that is what I always hate. That one of the things I always dislike about this industry is that there's like, here's your intro to malware analysis, and then there's like 401, like if we're doing university numbers, where it's like, hey, you've been around, here's what advanced hypervisor stuff looks like. There's no like intermediate. And one of the things that I appreciate about Bill is clearly doing, like, if we're all like normal, like say above average, Bill is like in that top 1% of a mix of capability and doggedness and know-how, because like who figures out how to like,
he specializes, like he's
yeah. And some of it, like, he's obviously fearless because he's not afraid to out these things that are like people that are going after humanitarians and journalists. He's not afraid of burning them. Obviously doing like exploit discovery and hunting on like the iPhone platform in particular is like, as we've said, as you guys have said on the show, is
he's
like
at the best.
Hard. Yeah. And so not only is he doing that, but he's coming up with these incredibly clever ways to like basically ping pong around an EC2 region to find like the source, like the true source IP of these things. I think one of the most interesting things about that piece was like, was the infrastructure provider that made that error inside the room at that conference, where he disclosed the method, right? And so there's like all these kind of implications, like, oh, is there like a Five Eye orb provider kind of thing? But like, I think that like that kind of him not only making that link that I think is like, I think that's actually the least interesting part of the blog. I think that more of it is around like, I think that tied a nice bow on it, but I think more of it's around like, this is what the best, like some of the best hunters and researchers and analysts in the world are capable of. And it kind of like is, you guys have talked a little bit about this show, like you see like the shark fin of a high-end actor, and then you don't really hear from it again. Like Bill isn't like out here teaching university courses on how to go from like, hey, I'm searching an IOC in Splunk to I'm building an anomaly detection system and I am like like using this weird IP switch to find these C2s.
With
and
no
so, like,
help from Apple, like just like, you know what I mean? In terms of like, there's no documentation or no, I mean, I'm paying tribute to the level of research and detail he has to do to maintain every version of every software on an old device and storing device and all of that background stuff that goes into mastering this art.
Yeah. And so like when he's out here disclosing a method, like it's kind of one of those things that I think some of us see ourselves sometimes as artists, and sometimes you have to look internally for inspiration. But when someone like Bill comes around, like it's one of those things that's like, okay, we should pay attention and take inspiration from what he's doing because he is like in that state of the art. Like going to these lengths because he has to, because he's chasing these apex predators that will otherwise evade him. Because passive DNS sometimes just isn't enough.
That's a perfect inspirational way to end it, rather than tell people to go look at ransomware. Shame on you. Juanito, close the show with some shout outs quickly.
Why me? No. So
We got 5 minutes.
Dude, very excited for Black Hat coming up. That's bullshit. I'm not very excited for Black Hat at all. I'm excited to see friends. It'll be nice to see friends for about as long as I can stand Vegas. Do come say hi, say nice things. Beyond that, the week after, we'll be releasing the LabsCon agenda. We're starting
some
to ship
exciting
out
keynotes to announce.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it is a stacked agenda, So I'm looking forward to those announcements and having an amazing conference in the near future. And beyond that, I don't know, Ryan. Like, who'd you got?
I don't know. Shout out to CNN. I see you in your suits all the way up on CNN being like a super expert. So shout out to CNN for giving us the possibility. Next time, if you name drop the pod. That was one I want to ask.
Look, man, I'm already trying to name drop Sentinel-1. I have 4 minutes, and I'm trying not to give into the hype bullshit that is like around these things. I think you're asking for too much.
Costin, you go next because I want to leave Greg for last.
Shoutouts to all the people who are following this Intrusion Truth blog that is apparently live again. There's like
so
some
many
new
stories we
posts.
didn't get to. So many fucking big stories we
He's
didn't
trying to
get to.
sneak it in the shout outs. You see? What kind of person does that?
Shout out to Intrusion Truth for
And
dropping you.
CJ Moses is back
Our
with
boy's
another
back.
post. Our boy's back.
The man's
yes. The
Shout
man
out to
Hardest
CJ.
working man
There's a
in
new
fucking
post out of
CTI.
There's a new post
with
out of
IOPS.
Amazon on DPRK actor activity in the supply chain stuff. A lot of stuff we didn't get to. I'm gonna still put the links in the show description so people can click on them. They'll probably come up again as leftovers from this week.
Right. And by the way, next week I'm in vacation, meaning the pod will be a bit delayed, right?
Correct. We're going to
A
be
bit
recording next
delayed.
week on Saturday when Costin is
Saturday.
back from vacation. Juanito, enjoy your time in Las Vegas. Stay away from the casinos and and remember to hydrate. Greg, thank you so much for coming on and hanging out for 3 hours and 25 minutes with us. I enjoyed it. It was thoroughly enjoyable. I think this put us back to the roots of what this podcast was created about. So it was an
I want to hear
amazing
more.
time. And we want to
more
hear
of
more.
Greg.
So there's always an open invite for you to come back whenever you have anything to announce. And with that, close the show with some of your own shout outs.
Cool. I'm going to thank first my friends and family who are watching my children right now while we're on vacation. So thank you. Thank you to them. Yeah. We're enjoying the Jersey Shore. Shout out to the threat research team at Proofpoint and the Tree team in particular, and all the folks that we got to collaborate with on the emerging threat side and with NSA, FBI, and all those entities. Yeah, and shout out to, I guess, the three of you guys for putting out a podcast that regularly inspires, I think, a subset of us in the community to pick up some nuggets when you guys drop them from time to time and go running with them. So yeah, thank you guys for having me. This was fun. Ryan, don't give me an open invite because it's going to be the 4-buddy problem if you do that.
All good, my friend. Hey, Costin is always going on vacation. Juanito is sometimes not available. Some weeks we struggle.
Sometimes.
Hey, you're always welcome to pop in as a fill-in buddy at any time. I'm dead serious.
Happy to do it.
Thank you,
We
guys.
need to
Take
do
care.
some paleontology con or nugget con.
3-buddy
Okay.
problem con.
Let's work
coming
on the
to
name.
a city near you.
Let's work on the name.
Thanks, guys. That's our show for
T-Rex
this
Con.
week. We'll catch you next week. Enjoy your time at Black Hat, everyone.
Problem con. Bye.